Imagine waking up one day and finally feeling like you're the one in charge, not your emotions, not your fears, not your distractions, just you, focused, calm, unshakable. Now be honest. How many times have you felt like life is just happening, you instead of you? Like you're stuck in a loop of overthinking, stress, and endless noise. The truth is, most people are not living. They're reacting. They're jumping from one task to another, controlled by notifications, drama, and moods. But what if you could step back, breathe, and take control of it all? This isn't just another self-help trend. This is ancient wisdom, sharpened for the modern world. In the next 3 hours, you're going to learn how to truly take control of your thoughts, your time, your habits, and your life using the power of Stoicism. And no, you don't need to be a philosopher or a monk. You just need a willingness to shift from chaos to clarity. These are not feel-good phrases. They're tools, tactics, mental armor passed down by the greatest minds in history: Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, men who faced war, loss, betrayal, and still found peace, focus, and purpose. So get ready, because once you understand how to think like a Stoic, you'll stop being overwhelmed by life and start owning it. Before we begin, I want you to make a decision right now. Write this in the comments or your journal. Starting today, I take full control of my life. I am Stoic. You're not just typing words. You're taking the first real step toward becoming who you were meant to be: clear, calm, and in control. Ready? Let's begin. Most people go through life without realizing just how much energy they waste trying to control things they never could in the first place. You know the feeling. When you replay conversations in your head, worry about what people think of you, or stress over things that haven't even happened yet. It drains you. It makes you feel stuck. But what if there was a way to cut through all of that? What if you could finally see clearly what deserves your attention and what doesn't? This is the first major step toward living with control, peace, and power. It's called the dichotomy of control, and it is one of the core principles of Stoicism. But today, you're not just going to read about it. You're going to learn how to apply it through a real daily tool: behavioral mapping. Once you master this, everything else in your Stoic journey becomes easier, because clarity is the beginning of power. Let's start with the truth. You are not in control of everything, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's freeing. The Stoics taught that if you can separate what is within your control from what is outside of it, you can let go of unnecessary pain and focus on what really matters. But knowing this is only the first step. You need to see it, track it, and live it. This is where behavioral mapping comes in. It's a simple but powerful way to connect the wisdom of Stoicism to the daily patterns of your life. It starts with awareness. Every day, you have hundreds of emotional reactions, some big, some small: frustration in traffic, anxiety before a meeting, irritation when someone ignores your message. Most of these reactions are automatic. They just happen. But Stoicism teaches you to pause and ask, is this something I can control or not? Now the key is to turn this into a daily practice. Start by creating a simple 2-column chart. On the left side, write things I cannot control. On the right, things I can control. Every time you feel a strong emotion, pause for just a moment and log the situation. For example, someone cuts you off in traffic. You feel anger rise. Stop and ask, can I control that driver's behavior? No. But what can I control? Your reaction, your breathing, your decision not to let one rude stranger take over your whole mood. That goes in the right-hand column. Over time, you start seeing patterns. You begin to notice how often your stress comes from things far outside your control. The news, the weather, other people's opinions, delays, disagreements, even your own past mistakes. These are things you respond to, but you don't control them. The more you log, the more you teach your mind to make that split automatically. This belongs to me, this doesn't. And here's where it gets even more powerful. You can start visualizing your own peace. Over a week, color code your map. Green for things you controlled well. Red for moments where you reacted to something beyond your control. You'll start seeing how often red shows up, and you'll also see how much of your emotional life is being driven by things you never chose. That's a wake-up call. Now think of what happens when this becomes a habit. You begin to build a buffer between stimulus and reaction. Instead of responding automatically, you start choosing how you act. That is freedom. Because the real trap isn't what happens to you, it's how fast you let your emotions run the show. Let's go deeper. Stoicism doesn't tell you to be cold or emotionless. That's a myth. It tells you to recognize that emotions are information, but they're not commands. Behavioral mapping helps you study that information. Say you get anxious every time your boss sends you a short email. Instead of spiraling into overthinking, pause. What do you control here? Not your boss's tone, not their mood, but you control your interpretation. You control whether you respond with fear or with curiosity. That goes on the right side. And this isn't just for negative emotions. Let's talk about praise. You get a compliment. You feel proud. Great. But here's the trick. Did you become a better person just because someone said something nice? No. You were already that person. The compliment only reflected it. You can enjoy praise, but don't depend on it. Log it, observe it, appreciate it, but don't hand your peace over to it. Now here's where most people go wrong. They believe that because something affects them, it must be their responsibility. That's not true. A screaming toddler on a flight affects you, but unless it's your child, it's not your job to fix it. A friend's crisis can shake you emotionally, but you're not obligated to carry their burden if it breaks your spirit. Stoicism teaches you that feeling empathy is human, but trying to fix everything is not always virtuous. It's often just ego in disguise. As your behavioral map grows, something else changes too, your standards for action. You stop asking, "Did this go well?" and start asking, "Did I do what was in my control?" That's a huge mental shift. Success is no longer about the outcome, it's about the effort. You learn to measure your life by your input, not external rewards. And ironically, that's when you start achieving more, because your energy isn't scattered anymore, it's focused. Now let's talk relationships. This is where most of our emotional pain comes from. You expect people to act a certain way. When they don't, you feel hurt, angry, disappointed. Use the map. Ask, did I control their choices? No. Did I clearly communicate my own boundaries, my values, my expectations? Yes. Then you did your part. No. Then you found something you can control. Next time, you'll do it differently. This practice makes you stronger, not because you suppress emotions, but because you stop wasting them. You don't lose yourself trying to fix everyone. You show up, do your best, speak your truth, and let go of what happens next. That's not detachment, that's maturity. Here's another layer: time. One of the most ignored parts of the dichotomy of control is our relationship with time. You don't control the past. Let that sink in. No matter how much you regret, no matter how much you replay it, nothing changes it. It is a locked file. But what you do control is how you use the lessons from it. Likewise, you don't control the future. You can plan, but you can't guarantee results. So why worry about next month's problem today? That doesn't make you more prepared. It just steals your focus from now, which is the only time you can actually influence. Every time you find yourself saying, "What if?" stop. Map it. What if I fail? Okay. Do you control whether people approve? No. Do you control how well you prepare? Yes. Focus there. You can also apply this principle to health. You don't fully control your body. Illnesses come, accidents happen, but you control your daily choices, your food, your rest, your movement. Instead of obsessing over outcomes, focus on process. Behavioral mapping doesn't just help you feel better, it helps you live better because you know where to put your effort. And let's talk about reputation. One of the biggest traps in life is caring too much about what people think. You want to be liked, understood, respected. But let's face it, not everyone will like you. Not everyone will get you. That's not personal. That's just reality. When someone misunderstands you, ask, did I act with honesty and intention? If yes, it's outside your control how they perceive you. That goes in the left column. Let it go. Because holding on to someone else's opinion is like trying to hold smoke. You'll only end up clouding your own mind. Over time, this whole process becomes natural. You'll start catching yourself mid-thought, asking, is this mine to carry? And if it's not, you drop it. Not because you don't care, but because caring for things you can't change is the fastest way to burn out. Here's something else most people miss. Not all things within your control are equal. Some are more important than others. Your mindset, your choices, your character, these are your core controls. Focus there. Don't get distracted by controlling every little detail. That's perfectionism disguised as discipline. Behavioral mapping helps you filter out the noise and amplify the signal. And that's what Stoicism is really about. Not becoming robotic, but becoming free. Free from false responsibility. Free from toxic guilt. Free from trying to manage what was never yours in the first place. So here's your task. For 1 full week, track your responses. Not just your actions, but your reactions. Every time you feel tension, write it down. Ask yourself, what part of this is in my hands? Be honest. You'll be surprised how many problems shrink when you shine that light on them. In the end, the dichotomy of control isn't about passivity. It's about precision. You stop trying to control the weather and start adjusting your sails. You stop yelling at the traffic and start using that time to breathe, think, or listen to something that feeds your mind. You stop wishing people were different and start showing up as the kind of person you respect. That's the shift. That's where power begins. And from here, everything starts changing. You've now laid the foundation. Your mind is clearer. Your emotions are calmer. You're not wasting energy fighting shadows. You know where your focus belongs. So now that you've learned how to separate what is in your control from what isn't, you've taken the first step toward emotional clarity. You've started to strip away confusion. But even when you know what belongs to you and what doesn't, there's still a quiet force inside you that can distort your focus, pulling you away from peace and pushing you toward frustration, comparison, insecurity, and overreaction. That force is the ego. It hides in small moments. It disguises itself as confidence, even when it's insecurity. It pretends to defend your dignity when, in truth, it's just craving attention. Ego isn't about being arrogant. It's deeper. It's the voice that whispers, "You need their approval to feel enough." It's the push that turns disagreement into conflict. It's the hunger to be admired, to be right, to be seen. And unless you see it clearly, ego runs your life from the shadows. This is why Stoics practiced daily reflection, not just about what they did, but about why they did it. They didn't just ask, "Was I kind?" They asked, "Was I kind out of love or to look good?" This level of honesty is hard, but it's the kind of honesty that makes you powerful. A daily ego audit is the tool that lets you go there. It's a way to check yourself, not to shame, but to sharpen. You use it like a mirror, held up at the end of the day, to see where ego crept in and where virtue held strong. You ask clear questions grounded in Stoic values, and you answer with courage. Because the goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Start with pride. It's one of the most common ways ego shows up, and it often feels good, until it doesn't. Pride wants to win every argument. Pride wants to be admired, to be above others, to be the one who knows more. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, it is possible to be happy even in a palace. His point? Status doesn't define peace. Pride makes you chase what doesn't last. It tells you your worth comes from how others see you, but the Stoics believed that your value is internal. It's measured by how closely you live to your principles, not by how loudly others applaud you. So ask yourself, at the end of each day, where did I act from pride instead of purpose? Was that clever comment really necessary, or did it just feed your sense of being better? Did you correct someone to help or to feel superior? These are quiet moments. They pass quickly, but they shape your identity. Then look at validation. This is the ego's favorite fuel. You want to be liked. You want your work praised. You want people to see your effort. That's natural. But when your motivation comes only from being seen, you lose your center. You become a performer, not a person. Epictetus was clear. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's not just theory. It means if you're growing, if you're being honest, if you're walking your own path, people won't always get it. And that's fine. The person who needs constant approval can never be free, because their peace lives in someone else's hands. So ask yourself, what did I do today just to be seen? Was that post for expression or attention? Did I help that person because they needed help, or because I wanted to be seen as helpful? Again, this isn't about guilt. It's about truth. You can't improve what you won't admit. Then there's impulse, another form of ego. You get irritated, and before you know it, you've snapped at someone. You feel insulted, and suddenly, you're deep into a silent argument in your own head. You make a purchase, not because you need it, but because it gives you a 5-minute high. These are not accidents. These are the ego's way of staying in control. The Stoics didn't see emotion as weakness. They saw it as something to understand and discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That means when emotion rises, pause. Ask, what is this really about? Is it fear? Is it pride? Is it a desire to not be seen as wrong? The ego makes you think every feeling deserves a reaction, but in truth, feelings are just weather. They pass. The audit helps you catch those moments. Where did I let emotion lead instead of reason? Maybe it was the tone you used. Maybe it was how fast you spoke. Maybe it was how little you listened. Write it down. The more specific you are, the more you grow. But the audit doesn't stop there. It also asks, where did I do well today? Because not every moment is a failure. There are victories, small ones, times when you stayed calm, times when you chose silence over shouting, times when you gave without needing to be seen. Record those too. This is how confidence grows, not from ego, but from truth. Now let's go even deeper. Ego can also hide in the desire to be right. Think about how often arguments are not about solving problems, but about protecting pride. You want to win, not because the issue matters, but because losing feels like weakness. But to the Stoic, being wrong isn't weakness. It's information. Marcus wrote, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth." That's humility. That's strength. So ask, did I resist truth today because it didn't match my image? That's ego. And ego is threatened by truth. But you don't have to be. Sometimes ego shows up in comparison. You see someone else succeed and you feel smaller. You see their life, their body, their success, and something in you tightens. That's not your heart speaking. It's your ego measuring your worth against someone else's highlight reel. Seneca warned about this. He said that as long as you compare yourself to others, your peace will always be at risk. Because comparison puts your focus on what you lack instead of what you have. And when you live like that, even your blessings start to feel like burdens. So the ego audit must ask, where did I compare myself today? And more importantly, why? Did you feel invisible, unappreciated, behind in life? That's the story ego tells, but it's not truth. And unless you expose that story, it will keep running the show. Now, let's talk about defense. One of the ego's most common reactions is defensiveness. Someone gives you feedback, and your first instinct is to protect your image. You explain, you deflect, you justify. But sometimes the real power is in listening, not defending. Epictetus said, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments about them." Feedback is not rejection, it's perspective. But ego sees every correction as an attack. That's where growth stops. So ask, where did I defend instead of reflect? That one question can shift everything. It turns criticism into guidance. It turns conflict into connection. Sometimes ego hides behind the need to fix everything. You want to help, to solve, to prove your usefulness. But not every problem is yours to fix, and not every person wants to be saved. The desire to always be the one with answers can be another way ego gets fed, through usefulness, through control. So the audit asks, where did I try to help out of ego, not love? It could be in giving advice no one asked for. It could be in pushing a solution too hard. It could even be in interrupting someone's process just so you could feel important. Helping isn't always helpful unless it's truly for them, not for you. Here's another angle: self-talk. The ego doesn't just speak outwardly, it also whispers inside. It tells you that you're not doing enough, that you're not successful enough, that you should be further by now. This voice sounds like motivation, but it's often just shame in disguise. The Stoics focused on progress, not perfection. They knew that the inner critic was often louder than the outer world. So your audit should include this. What did I say to myself today? Were your thoughts kind? Were they fair? Would you speak to someone you love the way you spoke to yourself? The ego also thrives on overdoing, overworking, overcommitting, overpromising. Why? Because it wants to be seen as capable. It wants to prove something. But this leads to burnout. And burnout is often ego in disguise, pushing you past your limits just to protect an image. So at the end of your day, reflect. Did I stretch myself today to grow or to prove? There's a difference. One is strength, the other is pressure. You'll feel the difference in your body. Listen to it. There's also the trap of control. You want things to go your way. Plans, people, processes. And when they don't, you feel thrown off, stressed, irritated. But as you've learned, control is limited, and the ego hates that. It wants to shape everything. But life isn't yours to control, it's yours to respond to. So ask yourself, where did I resist life instead of adapt? Did I hold too tightly? Did I force instead of flow? These questions open the door to peace, because once you stop trying to control everything, you can focus on controlling yourself. Lastly, ego often shows up in silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hides truth. You hold back saying what matters. You avoid hard conversations, not because you don't care, but because you're afraid of being misunderstood, disliked, or rejected. That's ego. It keeps you small under the illusion of safety. But Stoicism asks you to live with courage, to speak when truth is needed, to step into discomfort for the sake of integrity. So ask, what did I avoid saying today that needed to be said? That's where your strength is waiting. When you begin this daily ego audit, don't rush it. Take 10 minutes each evening. Write it down. Be honest. Be specific. Use the questions as prompts. You'll start to see patterns, areas where ego dominates and areas where virtue is growing. This is how you evolve, not through pretending to be perfect, but through knowing yourself better each day. And when ego no longer controls you, you can serve more clearly, love more freely, and live more lightly. That's the next step on this journey. And now that you've seen how to uncover what drives your actions, it's time to go even deeper into the practice of putting yourself through calculated discomfort, not as punishment, but as a tool for training your resilience. Once you've stripped back your ego and faced the truth about what drives you, something else becomes clear. Comfort has made most people weak. Not soft in body, but soft in mindset. Too many lives are controlled by avoiding anything uncomfortable, by needing things to be easy, predictable, and smooth. But real strength is not built when life feels perfect. It's built when you step into what you normally avoid and stay present with it. Voluntary discomfort is not about punishing yourself. It's about retraining the way your nervous system responds to challenge. When you deliberately choose discomfort, you are not just testing your will, you're refining your sensitivity, your patience, your humility. You're building a version of yourself that no longer depends on ease to function. This kind of training doesn't make life harder, it makes you harder to break. Start with the basics, physical discomfort. This is often the easiest to access and the most revealing. Cold exposure, fasting, controlled breath holds, waking up before sunrise, or going for long walks without entertainment. These are not for show. They are meant to provoke something deep, your attachment to comfort. During these exercises, the key is not just to complete the task. The key is to watch yourself. How fast does your mind start to complain? What kind of thoughts rise up first? This is stupid. Why am I doing this? This won't change anything. That's your internal resistance, and it's loud because it's been unchallenged for years. But discomfort teaches clarity. When you sit in a cold shower for even 1 minute, there is nowhere to run. It's just you, your breath, and your panic. You meet yourself without filters. And when you stay calm in that discomfort, you send a powerful message to your nervous system. We are safe. We don't panic at pressure. We're built for this. This kind of message rewires your baseline. It stretches what you think is possible. You don't just become more disciplined, you become more peaceful. Because panic loses its grip. Fasting is another classic tool used by both Stoics and sages of nearly every tradition. But don't fast just to follow a trend. Use it to watch your cravings, not just for food, but for escape. You'll notice how quickly the mind rushes to distractions when it doesn't get what it wants. That hunger isn't just in your stomach, it's in your thoughts, your habits, your patterns, and watching it with stillness is how you reclaim power. The real purpose of fasting is to remember that need is different from desire. You can feel the pull of hunger and still function, still speak kindly, still walk steadily. And that small victory stays with you long after the fast ends. Even how you sleep can become a tool for recalibration. Try sleeping without a pillow for a few nights. Lay on a hard surface. Let your body feel something different. Let go of the myth that you need everything just right to rest. You don't. Your body remembers how to adapt if you let it. But there's another layer, social discomfort. This is where most people quit. Speaking in public, saying no, confronting someone honestly, admitting a mistake without explanation. These are the discomforts that shape character faster than any physical test, because they reveal the deeper fear, not of pain, but of judgment. You will find that when you put yourself in a situation where people may misunderstand you or disapprove of you, your ego wants to scream. But if you stay grounded, something incredible happens. You realize you don't need everyone's approval to breathe. You stop being so afraid of opinions. You stop bending your values to keep peace. And that is where real peace begins. You can train this socially. Go through a day without checking your phone. Don't wear headphones in public. Strike up a small conversation with someone. Don't pretend to know an answer. Say, "I don't know," and feel what that does to your pride. These are not games. They are exercises in truth. The discomfort is small, but the gain is deep. You learn how to be fully yourself without apology. And then there's emotional discomfort. This is the hardest. Most people never sit in their own raw emotions without distraction. They drink, scroll, argue, sleep, eat. Anything but feel. But if you're willing to sit quietly with sadness, anger, fear, without pushing them away or acting them out, you will build the strongest emotional foundation a person can have. Discomfort isn't always fire. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's resisting the urge to text someone when you're feeling needy. Sometimes it's not explaining yourself when you're misunderstood. Sometimes it's telling the truth even when it shakes your voice. Every moment you choose that kind of discomfort, you take back control. You teach your body that pressure does not mean danger. That tension is not the same as threat. And this shift rewrites everything. But here's the part most people forget. Track it. Don't just endure. Observe. Journal. Write down how your body reacted, how long the discomfort lasted, what thoughts came up, what lies your mind told you to get out of it. You're going to fail. This doesn't matter. Just skip it today. Watch those lies like a hawk, because your strength is built by choosing action over excuse. You can start building a discomfort calendar. 1 new challenge per day. Not huge. Just one thing that forces you to feel resistance. Take the stairs. Skip the coffee. Go without makeup. Sit in silence during your commute. Talk to someone you normally avoid. And don't just do it. Feel it. Note the emotions. Note the shifts. You're not collecting suffering. You're collecting data on your own resilience. And over time, something beautiful happens. Things that once triggered you no longer do. You lose your fear of failure. You stop needing comfort to function. You don't flinch at tension. And when a real crisis comes, you've already trained for it. Not in theory, but in practice. There's something else. Voluntary discomfort also strengthens gratitude. When you go without, even briefly, you appreciate with deeper clarity. That warm blanket, that meal, that honest conversation, they feel richer, more real, because your senses are no longer dulled by excess. This is why the Stoics warned against luxury, not because pleasure is wrong, but because over-reliance on it makes you fragile. Fragility is not strength. It's dependence dressed in gold. Living with comfort isn't bad, but needing it is. That's the difference. A Stoic can enjoy luxury without becoming its servant, because they know who they are when it's taken away. Now here's something that's often missed. Voluntary discomfort also makes you more compassionate. When you suffer by choice, you recognize suffering in others more clearly, not as weakness, but as a shared human experience. You become less judgmental, more patient, not because you read about hardship, but because you've lived through your own, with your eyes open. And in moments where others crumble under pressure, you don't collapse. You hold the space, because you've trained for this. You've practiced staying steady when everything inside you screamed to run. That's power. Quiet, humble, unshakable power. Eventually, you stop chasing comfort and start chasing growth. You begin to love the stretch, the pull, the push, because you see what it's doing to you. Every challenge becomes a classroom. Every discomfort becomes a tool. And you realize this is not punishment. This is preparation. When you choose small discomforts often, life's big discomforts don't break you. You've trained your system to hold still in the storm. You respond instead of react. You breathe where others panic. You step forward when others freeze. But here's the final layer. Voluntary discomfort should never become performance. You're not doing this to prove anything, not to yourself, not to the world. You're doing it to come closer to truth, to remember what matters, to peel away the extra, to stand in simplicity and know that you are enough. The Stoic doesn't fast to impress. They fast to remember that hunger doesn't own them. They don't sleep on the floor to post about it. They do it to remind their body that softness is a choice, not a need. And that's the point of it all. Choice. Most people live without realizing how much their lives are ruled by preference. I feel cold. I must get warm. I'm bored. I must distract myself. I feel anxious. I must escape. But when you choose to lean into that moment instead, you break the cycle. You become free. There's no finish line. You don't graduate from discomfort. You keep practicing. Some days you'll want to quit. That's normal. but the person you're becoming is built in those exact moments when it's hardest, and you stay. So don't aim to be comfortable, aim to be capable. And now that you've learned to walk calmly through the storm, to meet your own resistance without fear, you're ready for what comes next, preparing for what could go wrong before it even happens. Because the Stoic doesn't wait for trouble to learn how to face it. They rehearse it. They greet it before it arrives. Sometimes anxiety doesn't come from the moment itself. It comes from what you haven't thought through, the unknown, the unexpected, the what-ifs. They creep in and take control, and when you avoid them, they don't go away. They grow. Fear is not always loud. Often it hides behind silence, behind fake confidence, behind rushed preparation. That's why the next tool isn't about avoiding fear. It's about facing it before it has a chance to own you. If you've trained your body to endure discomfort and your mind to recognize what's in your control, then you're ready for one of the most practical Stoic habits, preparing mentally for what could go wrong, not as a pessimist, but as a strategist. This practice is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It means you take time before any important task to walk through what could go wrong, and not just generally, but in clear, specific detail. The point is not to scare yourself, it's to build immunity to shock. When your mind has already walked the difficult path, the real event no longer shakes you in the same way. You've made space for it. You've rehearsed the weight. Before anything important, a meeting, a performance, a conversation, you stop and ask, what could go wrong? Not in a vague or dramatic way, in a precise, grounded way. Will someone interrupt you? Will your voice shake? Will your idea be rejected? Will you lose your place? Name it, then take it further. What would that actually feel like? How would your body react? Would your breath shorten? Would your hands sweat? Would your confidence drop? Write it down, say it out loud, let it be real. Because once you name it, it becomes smaller. Fear feeds on vagueness, but when you make fear specific, you make it manageable. Then you go a step deeper. What would I do if that happened? This is where power returns. You prepare a response. You decide how your character will behave, not just your words. So, if your idea is rejected, will you panic, or will you calmly ask for feedback? If you forget your words, will you freeze, or will you pause, breathe, and start again with humility? You start creating a plan, not just for success, but for failure. That doesn't mean you expect it. It means you've rehearsed it, and by rehearsing it, you remove its power to surprise you. This method doesn't kill optimism. It protects it. You're not ignoring the good. You're making space for all outcomes. That way, when things do go well, you don't take it for granted. And when they don't, you don't collapse. You've walked through this in your mind already. This practice also helps separate fear from reality. When you think clearly about what could go wrong, you often realize the consequences are not as big as your anxiety told you. You see that even failure has a shape. It ends. It can be handled. You survive. And if the fear is big, like losing a job, being embarrassed, facing rejection, then this practice gives you a head start on your emotional response. You ask, what would this loss teach me? What strength would I need? Who would I lean on? What part of me would grow through it? The Stoics weren't interested in avoiding hardship. They were interested in meeting it with dignity. And you can't meet what you've never looked at. The beauty of this habit is how practical it becomes. Say you're preparing for a job interview. Before going in, you spend 10 minutes alone. You ask, what's the worst that could happen? You don't get the job. You stumble on a question. They seem uninterested. You go blank. You rehearse each moment. You feel the sting, the awkwardness. Then you ask, what will I do? You decide, I will smile. I will own my mistake. I will ask a follow-up question. I will thank them for their time and leave with self-respect. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming becomes a script. You have direction. You've already seen the dark hallway, so now you're not afraid to walk down it. This technique applies everywhere. Before a difficult conversation with someone you care about, use this method. What if they get defensive? What if they shut down? What if you cry? Think it through. Accept that discomfort is possible, maybe even likely. Then remind yourself, clarity matters more than comfort. Speaking the truth matters more than avoiding tension. This rehearsal reminds you that fear is not a reason to stay silent. And in public speaking, one of the most common fears, this tool is life-changing. You take the time before stepping on stage or speaking up in a room to walk through each possible slip. You forget your line, someone walks out, you lose your pace, and instead of being shocked if it happens, you nod internally and say, I knew this was possible, and I'm still here. In every area, this preparation is not about control. You're not trying to force outcomes. You're trying to meet them with readiness. It's not about reducing effort. It's about strengthening the mind before the moment comes. You can turn this into a structured practice. Before any meaningful event, take 5 to 15 minutes to do the following. First, list all the possible points of failure or discomfort. Keep it grounded, not wild speculation. What could realistically go wrong? Second, write out what each situation would look like. Not just the event, but your physical and emotional response. How would it feel? What would you think? Third, write out your response plan. Not how to fix it, but how to stay composed, how to act with virtue, how to reflect your values even when rattled. Fourth, ask what deeper lesson or opportunity exists inside that failure. What might you gain from it? What might it teach you? This process turns panic into preparation. It rewires your emotional baseline. You stop seeing failure as threat and start seeing it as training. When Marcus Aurelius sat down to write, he wasn't documenting perfect wisdom. He was preparing himself. Each morning, he reminded himself of the people he might meet, the rude, the ungrateful, the impatient. He didn't do this to judge them. He did it to stay centered, because when the difficulty came, it would not be a surprise. It would be expected, and expected pain hurts less. The same principle works for any challenge. Athletes visualize before games. Pilots rehearse emergencies. Surgeons prepare for complications. You can do the same with life. The bigger the moment, the more valuable the rehearsal. And over time, you'll notice a shift. You walk into uncertain situations with less tension. You sit in the unknown with steadier breath. You still care, but you're no longer crushed by what might go wrong. Because you've already seen it, you've already made peace with the worst case. And that's what frees you to give your best effort without fear holding you back. This practice is also a compass for values. When you ask yourself, what will I do if it goes wrong? You clarify what kind of person you want to be in difficulty. Will you remain calm? Will you speak kindly? Will you listen before reacting? These choices become clearer through rehearsal. You're not relying on willpower in the moment, you're relying on preparation. And there's a bonus effect. When you walk into a situation having already rehearsed the worst, you're more present. You're not split between fear and action. You're not hoping everything goes perfectly. You're responding to what is. And that presence makes you more effective. Most people enter big moments hoping nothing will go wrong, but Stoics train for the opposite. They expect adversity, and they prepare for it, not by becoming cynical, but by becoming honest. And when something unexpected still happens, something you didn't plan for, you still benefit. Because the habit of preparation builds mental flexibility. Even if the failure isn't what you pictured, your mind is used to staying grounded. You're not thrown off course as easily. You bend, but you don't break. This process also builds humility, because facing possible failure reminds you that you are not untouchable. And that's a good thing. It keeps you honest. It keeps you kind. It reminds you that every outcome, good or bad, is part of the bigger training. As you practice this, you'll also find it sharpens your gratitude. When the worst doesn't happen, you notice, you feel it. You don't take the easy success for granted. You appreciate the silence between storms. You see that grace is not a right, it's a gift, and that awareness grounds you. Use this practice not just for big events, but also for daily stresses. Before a work call, before sending a difficult message, before going to a family dinner that usually creates tension. Take 2 minutes, walk the path, feel the emotion, make a plan, then go in calm. Over time, it becomes automatic. The moment fear rises, your mind starts preparing instead of panicking. Your breath slows, your posture steadies, your focus returns. This is not magic. This is mental training. And the more you use it, the more you start living from intention instead of reaction. Premeditatio malorum is not about focusing on the negative. It's about building resilience before you need it. It's about remembering that you can face more than you think. And it's about walking through the fire in your mind, so that when it comes in reality, you're ready. Not because it won't hurt, but because you've already practiced how to stand inside it without losing who you are. You've already trained your mind to prepare for what might go wrong. You've looked failure in the eye before it arrived. But there's another type of challenge, far more frequent and often more dangerous. Not because it's big, but because it's so small it goes unnoticed. These are the tiny moments when your patience breaks, the 5 seconds when you snap, the pause you skip, the sigh you let out too loud. These are the micro moments that shape your day and slowly shape your life. It's not the crisis that makes you bitter. It's the repeated, unexamined irritations. Stoicism teaches that it's not just about handling the big storms. It's about remaining steady when the wind barely moves, because those small wins are what build the habit of reaction, the sigh in traffic, the roll of your eyes when a page loads slowly, the muttered complaint when someone walks too slow in front of you. These reactions seem harmless, but they're not. They are training you to be reactive without thought, annoyed without reason, angry without benefit. That's where micro-detachment comes in. It's the practice of creating space inside your smallest reactions. Not 10 minutes, not 1 hour, just a few seconds. Enough to pause, enough to see clearly, enough to take control before the emotion decides for you. When your phone freezes, you don't need a lecture on patience. You need a breath, a single breath taken consciously before you let frustration drive your next thought. This breath becomes your training ground, because in that space you have a choice: react automatically or respond wisely. Micro-detachment is not the same as suppression. It's not about pretending you're not annoyed. It's about seeing the annoyance rise and choosing not to feed it. This changes your internal rhythm. It interrupts the spiral. The goal is not to become emotionless, it's to become emotionally sovereign. You recognize your tension, and instead of becoming it, you acknowledge it, and let it pass through. Take the example of being interrupted mid-sentence. The old habit is to get defensive, to talk louder, or to shut down. But what if, in that exact moment, you paused? You noticed your heartbeat rise, you felt the tightness in your chest, and you asked yourself silently, "Is this worth losing my calm over?" That question changes your course. You may still respond, but now it's deliberate, not impulsive. Micro-detachment also rewires how you relate to time. Waiting in line, being on hold, watching a loading bar. These moments create disproportionate stress for one reason. You believe time is being stolen from you. But what if you use those exact moments as training? Not just to endure, but to transform. Instead of reaching for your phone or muttering complaints, you center yourself. You observe your surroundings. You return to your breath. You let it be slow. This is not a waste of time. It's recovery. It's practice. And it builds strength quietly. This practice applies especially in relationships. Someone says something careless. A tone feels sharp. You feel hurt rise in your body. That's the moment. The 5 seconds before you react. This is where your training must live. If you speak from that sting, you will likely escalate. If you pause, you might still respond firmly, but without creating more damage. That small gap creates safety, and that safety creates respect. Micro-detachment also helps reset the nervous system. Every time you pause instead of reacting, your brain learns that not every discomfort requires action. This builds emotional durability. You don't get as drained. Your energy isn't wasted on constant friction. Your presence grows. You carry less residue from each moment into the next. Another key area where this practice is valuable is during technical frustration. A frozen screen, a software bug, a sudden crash. These moments don't just trigger stress because of the delay, they trigger a loss of perceived control. But in truth, you never had control over machines. What you do have is control over how you meet the disruption. A slow breath, a slight smile, a reminder, this is not worth polluting my peace. That's the truth Stoicism offers. Not that life will be smooth, but that you can stay smooth within life. You don't need to force your way through each glitch and bump. You let the moment pass like a wave, without needing to ride everyone. To build this skill, start by choosing one recurring moment of irritation, just one, a small delay, a repeated annoyance. Then for 1 week, use that moment as a cue. Every time it happens, breathe once, then twice. Count backward. Notice your body. Name the feeling silently. This is frustration. This is impatience. By naming it, you create distance. You are not the emotion. You are the observer. Then ask yourself, what would a wise person do right now? Not what would feel good, not what would win, but what would align with calm, with clarity, with character. That becomes your anchor. Repeat it, rehearse it. Slowly, this becomes your baseline. Micro-detachment doesn't mean you always respond perfectly, but it means your responses begin from choice, not habit. It means that even if tension builds, you've built enough awareness to let it pass before it hardens into action. This also builds mental sharpness, because when you no longer get emotionally hijacked by every minor inconvenience, your attention stays free. You think more clearly. You act with more precision. You recover faster from stress, all because you trained for the small moments that no one else thought mattered. But they do matter, because your days are made up of them. And if each one pulls your mood, your peace, your focus, you're being ruled by randomness. Stoicism replaces that with purpose. This doesn't mean you become passive. You still speak up when needed. You still correct what must be corrected. But you do it from steadiness, not from the emotional spillover of a dozen small, unchecked reactions. This is especially useful in traffic. That sudden stop, that person cutting in, that unexpected delay. Instead of gripping the wheel tighter, you loosen your breath. Instead of yelling internally, you scan your body. What are you feeling? Where is the heat rising? What thought is driving it? And most importantly, do I want to carry this home with me? If the answer is no, let it drop there. Let that moment die in that moment. Micro-detachment also helps with digital triggers. The need to check your phone, the pull of the notification, the urge to reply instantly. All of these are tiny compulsions, each stealing a bit of your focus. Use the same approach. Pause. Ask, is this important right now? Or, will this matter in 10 minutes? This small filter creates freedom. Even in physical discomfort, the method applies. A tight shoe, a sore neck, a noisy environment. Instead of tensing against it, acknowledge it. Yes, this is uncomfortable. But then decide not to collapse into it. Not every discomfort needs a fix. Some just need to be witnessed and passed through. That is inner calm. Over time, these pauses create a rhythm of awareness, and that rhythm becomes your shield. You start noticing early signs of reaction before they explode. You feel the tightness before it becomes a complaint. You feel the rush before it becomes a snap. This is mastery, not because you control the world, but because you control yourself within it. Even boredom becomes an opportunity. The pause between tasks, the quiet of waiting. You can train there too. Sit in that space. No phone, no scrolling. Let your thoughts slow. Let your breath deepen. These are not empty seconds. These are seeds of presence. You're watering awareness, and that awareness, multiplied across days, changes your life. You don't just become more peaceful, you become more powerful, not in a loud way, in a way that needs no defense. You walk with less effort, you speak with less noise, you choose with more care. To make this a part of daily life, choose 3 micro-triggers, the ones that always get you. Maybe it's slow walkers, maybe it's a co-worker's tone, maybe it's a delayed email. Whatever it is, make it your training ground. Each time it happens, pause. Don't clench. Don't rush. Breathe. Respond from stillness. Or don't respond at all. Use the pause to check your values. Does this action reflect who I want to be? If not, hold. Wait. Then act when your mind is clear. You don't owe your impulses a voice. You owe your values a presence. This is how you build strength without tension, courage without noise, influence without aggression. It's how you become unshakable in a world of small storms. When you start mastering your reactions in small, frustrating moments, you begin to take ownership of your time in ways most people never will. But even with greater calm, even with the ability to pause and respond with clarity, there's a deeper truth that must be acknowledged. Your time is running out. That is not a theory. It's not a motivational phrase. It is the most certain fact of your existence. Yet most people live as if they have all the time in the world. We talk about plans, dreams, ambitions, but we rarely ask how much time we really have to fulfill them. We delay what matters, not because we're lazy, but because we think there will always be more time. Stoicism cuts through that illusion by forcing us to look directly at our own mortality, and not in a poetic or abstract way, but in a measured, visual, personal way. This is where the memento mori timeline comes in. The goal of this exercise is to bring your life into sharper focus, to see your remaining time not as an endless stretch of some day, but as a limited sequence of moments you will either use or waste. You start by mapping out your expected lifespan in weeks. Take a simple sheet with 52 squares per row, each square representing 1 week of your life. Multiply that by the average human lifespan, say 80 or 90 years, and you get a full grid, a visual timeline of your entire existence. Now, fill in the weeks you've already lived. Mark them in black. Those are gone, non-refundable, done. Then take a step back. What's left? How much white space remains? That's what you've been given. That's what you still control. And the moment you see it laid out in front of you, something shifts. You stop assuming time is infinite. You stop casually postponing the things that matter. You begin to feel a sense of urgency, not panic, but clarity. This practice does something the mind alone cannot. It makes time physical. You can see the weight of procrastination. You can feel the cost of delaying action. A week gone is not just an idea. It's a marked square. And with each new week, another one is filled. The grid doesn't lie. The countdown continues. But this isn't about fear. It's about perspective. The timeline doesn't exist to scare you. It exists to wake you up. You begin to ask better questions. If I only have this many weeks left, how do I want to spend them? What relationships deserve more time? What habits deserve to end now? What am I waiting to start that cannot wait any longer? It's easy to say someday until you see how few somedays remain. That trip you've been planning for 5 years, that book you want to write, that apology you keep avoiding, how many weeks will pass before you act? The timeline helps remove the fog. You can't pretend the delay is harmless when the cost is visible. You can take this further by adding milestones. Mark significant events in your past, graduations, jobs, losses, changes. Then mark anticipated ones, retirement, a child's graduation, potential major transitions. This creates anchors in your future. It helps you see the shape of your life. And when you do this, you also start seeing how little time exists between them. Years are abstract. Weeks are not. There are only so many left. And you realize the future isn't something you wait for. It's something you walk into, square by square, starting now. You can also use colors to track emotional seasons, mark periods of difficulty, growth, healing. See how long they lasted. Notice that pain passed, that challenges ended, that joy returned. This builds emotional resilience. You stop thinking this is forever when discomfort shows up, because you've seen in your own record that nothing lasts forever. Not the joy, not the sadness. Everything passes, including you. The timeline becomes more than a visual, it becomes a mirror. It shows how much time you've spent aligned with your values and how much you've spent on distractions. It shows how many days were given to things that didn't matter in the long run. And it challenges you to decide what kind of dots you want to fill in next. When you connect this practice to your daily habits, everything changes. That 1 hour of distraction costs a square. That one missed opportunity doesn't disappear. It fills in a part of your grid with something less than meaningful. But the opposite is also true. Every meaningful hour adds weight to your life. When you spend time in alignment with your purpose, with your people, with your principles, that square becomes rich. Gratitude deepens too. When you see that your life is made of a fixed number of weeks, each one becomes more sacred. Even the quiet ones, even the ordinary ones, especially those. You start to see that there's no such thing as a throwaway week. Every one is either a step toward the person you want to be or away from it. And that's a powerful filter for decision-making. You also stop chasing perfection. If you only have a few thousand weeks to live, then trying to be flawless becomes less important than trying to be present. Trying to impress others fades. You realize how few weeks you have to care for the people you love, how few weeks to read the books that shape your thinking, how few weeks to serve, to build, to contribute. And suddenly, scrolling, arguing, complaining, these things don't just feel like bad habits. They feel like theft, because they take from the most limited resource you have. Use the timeline to plan your future intentionally, not to control it, but to guide it. If you want to write a book in the next 2 years, block out those weeks. See what needs to be moved. If you want to travel with your parents, mark the windows before health becomes a barrier. Don't just plan based on goals, plan based on life. Because life doesn't wait. The timeline doesn't pause when you're tired or distracted or unsure. It just moves. So should you. It's also a tool for forgiveness. When you feel regret for past choices, the timeline reminds you, those squares are already black. You can't undo them, but you don't have to let them decide the color of the rest. If you've wasted time, acknowledge it. Then stop wasting more. Every week you live with guilt is another dot you could have filled with healing instead. Share this idea with people close to you. Build your own timeline and invite others to reflect on theirs. Not to compete, but to connect. When people see their time laid out in weeks, they often speak more honestly. They become less guarded, more real. Conversations deepen, defensiveness drops, because nothing cuts through nonsense like the reality of limited time. This also shifts how you approach conflict. That argument you're holding on to, will it still matter in 10 weeks, in 100? Is it worth letting it stain the space you still have left? If not, let it go, or resolve it, or find peace, even if closure never comes. Because you won't get those squares back, and some things aren't worth the cost. Reflecting on mortality doesn't have to make life heavy. It can make it more vibrant. When you understand that something will end, you love it more. You see beauty where others see boredom. You find meaning where others see routine, because you've trained your eyes to look beyond comfort and to see what is truly limited. You can even carry a small version of the timeline with you, a bracelet with beads, a folded paper in your wallet, a note on your phone. A daily reminder, time is moving. Stay awake. Don't waste it. Don't numb yourself through it. Show up. That's what memento mori really means. Remember that you must die, so you remember how to live. This exercise also grounds ambition. You stop fantasizing about vague futures and start asking, what step can I take this week? Big dreams become real when they're broken into time. You don't need to rush. You need to act, one square at a time, one effort at a time. And if fear of failure slows you down, remember, failure also fills time. But so does doing nothing. At least with effort, you learn, you grow, you get closer. The timeline doesn't ask you to win. It asks you to use the time with intention. Each week that passes is not just about aging, it's about becoming more aligned with what matters, becoming less reactive, more compassionate, more focused, less attached to what won't last, and more rooted in what will. You won't be here forever. But that's not the problem. The problem is forgetting that truth long enough to waste your days. The timeline is your anchor. When you lose focus, return to it. When you feel lost, look at it. When you don't know what matters, consult it. It won't give you answers, but it will remind you of the question that matters most. How do you want to live the time you have left? When you begin to see how limited your time really is, your priorities shift. What once felt urgent starts to lose its grip. You begin to act more deliberately. But there's still one more step that takes your perspective to a completely different level, not by counting time, but by zooming out of your own identity altogether. Not just the events of your life, but your place in the world, in history, in the vast chain of existence. This practice isn't about escape. It's about release. Letting go of the weight you carry when everything feels personal, when the story of me becomes too loud, when your problems grow larger than they actually are. This tool is called the view from above, and it's one of the most profound Stoic exercises for calming emotional chaos and reshaping perspective. At its core, this meditation works by taking your current experience, whatever stress, drama, frustration or tension you're facing, and viewing it from a distance. Not just a few feet away, but higher and higher, until your entire life becomes part of a much wider picture. Start by locating yourself right now, where you're sitting or standing. Acknowledge the space around you. Then mentally rise a few floors up, seeing the room from above. Then expand to the building, the block, the city. Keep going. Slowly, step by step, widen your view until your home, your town, and eventually your whole country is beneath you. From that height, your current emotion already begins to feel smaller. The conversation that went badly, the email that upset you, the plan that failed. You can still feel it, but its size begins to change. It loses some of its grip. It becomes one moment among millions occurring at that very instant. Rise higher again. See the continent, then the planet, spinning silently in space. Billions of people, each with their own stress, their own fears, their own inner dialogue. You are one of them. Important, yes, but not the center. This is not to diminish your value. It's to free you from unnecessary attachment to every discomfort. From this altitude, you can also see how brief every human life is, a blink in cosmic time. All the things people worry about, fame, wealth, status, fade. All the judgments, comparisons, resentments, they seem smaller than they ever have before. And this isn't about being indifferent, it's about being wise. This meditation grounds you in scale. It reminds you that while your experiences matter, they are not the whole story. Your disappointments are not the edge of the universe. They are part of a passing pattern. From up high, you can also see yourself differently, not just as a role or a name, but as a human being passing through. You see your timeline from beginning to end. You see how many days you may have left. You begin to question, am I spending them on things that make any real difference? This shift reduces ego, not by crushing it, but by putting it in context. You no longer need to win every argument, to defend every opinion, to protect your image at all costs. Because you see that your image is not fixed. It's just one layer in a complex, ever-moving world. And most of the time, other people are not thinking about you at all. They are busy with their own storms. When you use this view during a stressful situation, it breaks the loop. Emotional spirals often come from narrowing perspective. You zoom into the moment so tightly that it consumes you. But the wider your perspective, the more you access patience, compassion, tolerance. You realize you don't need to react to everything. Some things can simply be observed and released. This is especially powerful when dealing with conflict. Someone offends you. You feel disrespected. Your chest tightens, but then you pause, mentally rise. From above, you see them too, not just as someone rude, but as someone with a full life of their own, someone shaped by their own history, their own pain, their own unknown pressures. Maybe they didn't mean to offend. Maybe they did. Either way, you get to decide whether this moment deserves your peace. The practice also clears room for gratitude. When you zoom out far enough to see the billions of lives playing out simultaneously, you feel awe. You remember how rare your specific combination of experiences, abilities, and connections truly is. And from that awareness, your complaints soften, your entitlement drops. You're not owed anything, and yet you've been given so much. The ability to think, to feel, to grow. That alone is reason to keep going with humility. You don't have to wait for emotional chaos to use this meditation. In fact, the more you practice it regularly, the easier it becomes to apply in difficult times. Take 5 minutes in the morning or evening. Close your eyes. Picture yourself rising, not escaping, just observing. From that distance, ask yourself simple questions. What really matters today? What am I holding too tightly? What can I let go of? The practice is also helpful for making decisions. When you're stuck between options, zooming out helps filter what's true versus what's just fear or ego. You might ask, in 1 year, will this choice still feel important? From a wider view, does this path align with the kind of person I want to become? Clarity comes from perspective, and this meditation is how you get there without needing external advice. This habit can also prevent burnout. Often we push ourselves endlessly because we think everything is urgent. But from above, urgency often looks like anxiety dressed up as responsibility. You can pause and say, this task matters, but not more than my health, my peace, or my integrity. You realign your focus with what lasts, not just what shouts the loudest. Even positive emotions can benefit from this view. Excitement, achievement, praise. They feel great. But zooming out reminds you these are passing too. Celebrate them, but don't cling. Don't let your worth depend on them. From above, you see that even success is just one of many moments. What stays with you isn't the applause, it's the meaning behind the work. When you lose someone you care about, this view also helps hold the grief. You feel the pain, but you also remember that death is part of the same pattern. Not a mistake, not an interruption, a continuation of what life has always been. Everyone returns to the same place eventually. Knowing this doesn't take away the loss, but it helps you carry it with grace instead of resistance. Children benefit from this teaching too. Helping them see that they are part of something larger builds humility early. It reduces entitlement. It teaches them to focus on contribution, not just consumption. You can guide them through the same visualization. Help them see their place in the family, the community, the planet. It's a gift that shapes lifelong perspective. For personal setbacks, this view becomes a reset button. The failure that feels crushing, the missed opportunity, the mistake. Rise above it. See it as part of a longer arc. It's not the whole story. It's one chapter. And you're still the author. This practice also softens your inner critic. From a wider view, your past mistakes don't look like shameful failures. They look like steps in a learning process. You were growing. You're still growing. That's all. You don't need to define yourself by the worst thing you've done or by the best. Both are just moments. What matters is the direction you keep moving in. Integrating this meditation into your daily life doesn't require silence or solitude. You can use it while walking, in the middle of a meeting, during conflict, even in a long line. Mentally rise above the moment. Breathe, see it from a higher view, and act from that clarity. Often your response will change before the situation does. Some people use a journal alongside this practice. At the end of the day, they reflect, what did I take too seriously? Where did I overreact? What would this look like from 10,000 feet up? This reflection builds emotional intelligence. You stop living on instinct alone. Others create visual anchors, a photo of Earth from space, a quote that reminds them of scale, a mantra, rise above. These tools help you shift out of tunnel vision when things get tense. The goal is not to detach from life. It's to engage with life from a stronger center, to stop being pulled into every emotional wave, to stand on the shore and watch the tide with calm eyes. That's what the view from above gives you, not perfection, perspective, and from that, peace. Once you've trained yourself to see life from a higher altitude, to view moments without being consumed by them, a new question starts to surface. What do you do with everything that has already happened? The mistakes, the decisions you regret, the opportunities missed, the people you hurt, the times you fell short of who you wanted to be. These aren't just memories. They're part of your shape. They've helped create who you are. But most people carry them like stones, heavy, unexamined, unresolved. Stoicism offers another way. You don't erase the past. You study it. You look at it through new eyes. This is the purpose of building a Stoic failure inventory, not to shame yourself, not to dwell on pain, but to draw value from the exact moments you've been trying to avoid, the ones that taught you most, even if you didn't realize it at the time. Start by listing your failures, not vaguely, but clearly. Write them down. The job you lost, the relationship you damaged, the opportunity you passed up, the conversation you mishandled. Don't write a paragraph. Write a sentence for each, specific, honest, direct. You're not rewriting the story yet. You're just laying it out. Once you've listed them, take one at a time and begin the deeper process. First question, what did you actually control in that situation? Not what you wish you'd controlled, not what you hoped would change. What did you truly own? This is the core of Stoic self-honesty. Marcus Aurelius didn't waste energy on what others did. He focused on how he responded. Your goal here is not to justify the failure. It's to separate the part you shaped from the part that shaped you. If you were fired, was it because of your actions, or was it a business decision out of your hands? If it was your behavior, what pattern led to it? Were you careless, passive, distracted, or did you just work under someone who valued different things? Be honest but fair. The point is to see clearly, not to create a new identity around blame. Then, ask which virtue was tested. In each failure, there was a moment when your character had a choice. Did you uphold wisdom or rush in without thinking? Did you exercise courage or avoid a difficult truth? Did you hold to justice or serve only your own interest? Did you act with temperance or did emotion override principle? This is how Stoics measure progress. Not by success, but by how they behave when things fall apart. Most people only evaluate results. Stoics evaluate integrity. That's why even failure is useful. if it reveals something you couldn't see before. Maybe you failed to speak up in a meeting. What was tested? Courage. What did you control? The words you didn't say. What did you learn? That silence can cost you just as much as saying the wrong thing, or maybe more. So, next time, you speak. Not because you're confident, but because now you know the cost of holding back. Another example. A friendship ended. What was in your control? Did you ignore signs of resentment? Did you avoid conversations? Was there a moment you chose being right over being kind? Look for the fracture point. Not to punish yourself, but to gather the lesson. Every fracture leaves a shape. Trace it. Learn from it. When you take your entire list and walk through it like this, a pattern starts to form. You begin to see your common weaknesses, your repeated blind spots, the habits that keep you stuck. This is gold, because now you're not guessing. You're not trying to fix a vague sense of not being good enough. You're working with real evidence, and real evidence leads to real change. But there's another side to this. What strengths came from these failures? What virtues grew stronger because of the pain? Often, we become who we need to be because of who we weren't at a critical moment. If you acted out of pride and lost something meaningful, maybe humility grew from that loss. If you avoided responsibility and saw the damage it caused, maybe accountability now means more to you than it ever did before. These changes are rarely immediate, but they take root. That's why it's important to go back and look, to notice the evolution. Not every failure is a loss. Many are redirections, warnings, hard-earned wisdom. Your job is to catch what they gave you, to stop letting them define you and start letting them instruct you. You can also ask, how would a Stoic interpret this? What would Epictetus say if you told him this story? He wouldn't pity you, he wouldn't coddle you. He'd ask, what did you expect? That life would go exactly as planned? That people wouldn't change? That you wouldn't make mistakes? And then he'd say, now that it happened, what will you do with it? This is not harshness. This is power, because it turns you from victim into student, from someone hurt by the past into someone built by it. That's the shift. That's the freedom. You can add another layer to the inventory. After identifying the virtue tested and the lesson learned, ask, how am I applying this lesson now? Where is the evidence of growth? If you've truly learned, it should show. In your conversations, in your boundaries, in your choices. If it doesn't, then the failure is still unprocessed. It's still teaching something you're ignoring. This doesn't mean you should live in the past. The goal is not to relive old pain. The goal is to squeeze it for clarity and move on lighter. Think of it like mining. You go into the past to extract what matters. Then you leave, stronger, clearer, less reactive. And when new failures happen, as they will, you now have a tool to deal with them. You don't panic, you don't spiral, you go to your inventory. You break the moment down. What did I control? What did this test? What will I do differently? That process itself is strength. Most people fear failure. Stoics use it. This kind of clarity also softens your view of others. When you realize how often your own missteps came from fear, confusion, or pressure, you stop expecting perfection from everyone else. You develop compassion, not just as a value, but as a recognition of shared fragility. You also stop letting guilt define you. Guilt, when useful, leads to correction. When stale, it becomes self-punishment. The inventory helps you see when enough has been learned. when it's time to stop bleeding for an old wound and start living with new purpose. That shift is sacred, and no one gives it to you. You claim it when you've done the work. Some people choose to burn their list after the lessons are taken, not to forget, but to mark the shift from weight to wisdom. Others keep it and revisit it yearly, like a report card, a mirror, a checkpoint. However you do it, make it a ritual, not just once, but part of your rhythm. You can also teach this to others, not by preaching, but by living transparently. When someone fails near you, don't shame them. Walk them through the same questions. Help them see the structure in what looks like ruin. Show them that failure doesn't have to end them. It can shape them, like it shaped you. As this inventory grows, so does your resilience. You stop fearing the next mistake because you've seen how strong you became from the last one. You don't aim to fail, but you stop fearing it. That's real courage. Not the absence of failure, but the refusal to be owned by it. The more clearly you understand your past, the less you get trapped by it. The more intentionally you reflect, the more cleanly you move forward. This is what the Stoic builds, not a perfect life, but a powerful one. Not flawless action, but relentless growth. Once you've looked honestly at your failures, recognized the lessons they hold, and begun using them as tools for growth, the next step becomes clear. If you've studied the past with sincerity, you're now ready to shape the present with intention. This is where reflection becomes structure, growth becomes system, and daily life becomes your training ground. Stoicism doesn't just ask you to think differently, it asks you to live differently. And that means tracking how your actions align with your values. The four cardinal virtues, wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, aren't just ancient ideals, they're practical standards. And once you begin measuring them, you stop relying on guesswork to determine if you're on the right path. You start to build a life of consistency, clarity, and strength. The four virtues are the compass of the Stoic. Wisdom is the ability to judge correctly, to see things as they are, and respond with reason. Courage is your willingness to act in the face of discomfort, fear, or risk. Temperance is your ability to moderate impulses, stay balanced, and resist extremes. Justice is your commitment to fairness, honesty, and the good of others. Each one matters. Each one supports the rest. And if one weakens, the whole structure becomes unstable. A weekly tracker helps you see your relationship with these virtues clearly. It isn't a diary of thoughts, it's a record of action. What did you do that reflected each virtue? Where did you fall short? What situations tested you? This process is both grounding and humbling. It forces you to admit where your character needs reinforcement, not because you're failing, but because you're practicing. Start with wisdom. Throughout your week, there are many moments where you are called to see clearly. You are asked to decide between what feels good and what is good, between reacting and thinking, between habit and truth. You might reflect, did I speak without full understanding? Did I seek advice when I should have? Did I pause to reflect before making a hard choice? Wisdom isn't knowledge, it's applied clarity. You can know what's right and still ignore it. Wisdom is acting on that knowledge, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. In your tracker, note moments where you did act wisely, and those where you didn't. Maybe you let frustration speak louder than reason. Maybe you made a quick decision and realized later that patience would have revealed more. Don't condemn yourself, just capture it. These moments are your curriculum. Wisdom isn't a final achievement. It's a skill built over time, through trial and reflection. Next is courage. This one often hides. Not every moment of courage looks dramatic. Sometimes it's telling the truth when it would be easier to stay silent. Sometimes it's asking a question when you're afraid of looking foolish. Sometimes it's saying no, or saying yes, or walking away. Ask yourself, where did I act even though I was afraid? Where did I let fear shape my silence, my avoidance, or my delay? Courage isn't loud. It doesn't need an audience. It's a private contract between your values and your actions. And each time you break that contract, you weaken your ability to stand strong in the future. Each time you keep it, you reinforce your spine. When tracking courage, be precise. Don't just write, "Stood up for myself." Write what you risked, what you feared, what it cost, and what it gave you. The more clearly you see the cost of courage, the more real it becomes, and the easier it becomes to act again when the stakes rise. Then comes temperance. This is where your discipline lives, your restraint, your ability to say enough, not just with food or drink, but with opinions, emotions, attention. How many times did you interrupt? How often did you speak more than was helpful? How often did you act from impulse rather than principle? Temperance isn't about deprivation, it's about mastery. The strength to choose moderation over excess, simplicity over indulgence, stability over mood. This is often the most subtle virtue and the one people underestimate, but it builds the foundation for all others, because without temperance, your wisdom gets drowned out by urgency, your courage becomes recklessness, your sense of justice can become self-righteous. When tracking this virtue, focus on your patterns. Were you present in your decisions, or running from one craving to the next? Did you stop when you could have? Did you rest when it was needed, or push for ego's sake? This virtue teaches you to manage energy, not just time, because a person ruled by their impulses is not free. Finally, justice. The Stoics saw this as the highest virtue, the one that connects you to others. It's not just about fairness in society, it's about how you treat people when no one's watching. Did you speak truthfully, even when it cost you? Did you honor commitments? Did you consider how your actions affected others? Justice is about living in alignment with what serves not just you, but the whole. It requires empathy without self-abandonment, strength without dominance, honesty without cruelty. When tracking this virtue, ask, where did I serve the greater good? Where did I act from selfishness disguised as strategy? Where did I choose silence over accountability? This is the virtue that grows in service, when you help without needing recognition, when you correct gently instead of judging, when you choose what's right over what's easy. This is not weakness, this is integrity. The tracker should be reviewed weekly, not daily. Daily reflection is good for noticing emotion and habits. Weekly reflection shows you patterns, growth, regression, the arc of your character over time, and that's what you're building, a consistent internal structure, a stable foundation that holds steady when the pressure comes. Over time, your entries will show you where you've been avoiding discomfort, where you're overcompensating, where you're leaning too heavily on one virtue and ignoring another. You might be wise, but lack courage. You might be just, but not temperate. The tracker brings balance, and balance brings strength. Make this practice simple. 4 sections, 1 for each virtue, a few sentences per section. Answer 3 questions. Where did I live this virtue? Where did I fail it? How will I adjust? This is not about perfection. You will fail, and that's the point. Because the moment you stop failing, you've stopped testing yourself. This tracker is your feedback loop, not to shame you, but to shape you. Use it also as a guide for decision-making. When facing a hard choice, you can ask, which virtue is being tested here? That alone often gives you the answer. If it's wisdom, slow down. If it's courage, step up. If it's temperance, hold back. If it's justice, consider the greater good. You can integrate the virtues into conversation, not by quoting philosophy, but by asking in your own words, was that fair? Was that necessary? Was that kind? You'll start to hear the shift in your own language, less reactive, more reflective. This process also deepens your sense of meaning. When you know what virtues you're cultivating, every action becomes part of a larger mission. You're not just passing time, you're building something. And not just for others to see, but for yourself to respect. Some people keep their tracker private. Others share parts of it with a mentor, a partner, a close friend. Not for judgment, but for accountability. When someone else sees your patterns, they can help reflect what you might miss. Over time, the tracker becomes more than a habit. It becomes a mirror, and not a mirror of mood or circumstance, a mirror of who you are becoming and who you are committed to being. This is how philosophy becomes practice, not through reading, through repetition, through correction, through action, through reflection. Once you begin tracking how the 4 virtues play out in your daily life, you realize something important. Your external environment constantly tests your internal values. No place does this more rapidly or repeatedly than the digital world. This isn't a distant battlefield. It's in your pocket. It's in your hand before you even realize it. And it's not neutral. Every scroll, every notification, every headline is a subtle nudge, pulling you to react, compare, respond, consume. If your mind is unguarded, it becomes shaped by algorithms before you've had time to think. Applying Stoicism to the digital world is not about retreat. It's about protecting attention, reinforcing character, and reducing unnecessary emotional noise. Stoicism teaches self-governance. In the digital era, that means reclaiming control from the devices, platforms, and content that constantly compete for your focus. One of the most common emotional traps online is outrage. Headlines are written to spark anger. Videos are framed to provoke judgment. Comments are designed to divide. If you're not careful, your piece becomes hijacked by someone else's story. Stoicism breaks this cycle by asking a clear question: is this within my control? If not, then why am I reacting? Marcus Aurelius wrote that we have power over our minds, not outside events. When you apply this to digital consumption, you stop trying to fix the world through likes or comments. You start choosing where your attention goes. You decide which battles are worth entering and which ones are noise disguised as urgency. This begins with filtering. Curate your digital environment like a Stoic curates thoughts. If a platform constantly triggers resentment, step away. If a person's posts lead you to compare rather than connect, mute them. You don't owe your attention to anything that distorts your values. Digital boundaries are as necessary as physical ones. A mind without filters absorbs the weight of everything it touches. Next is the trap of comparison. Social media distorts reality by showing highlight reels. The most curated moments, filtered through edits, staged poses, and polished language. If you forget that, you start measuring your actual life against someone else's performance. That's not comparison, it's self-sabotage. Epictetus taught that you should measure success not by external appearances, but by how closely you align with reason and virtue. When you scroll, ask yourself, is this inspiring action or creating doubt? Is this helping me become better or making me feel less? If it's the latter, step back. The world doesn't need more passive observers. It needs people who live intentionally, and intention requires clarity, not distraction. You can also use the concept of temperance here. How often do you check your phone without purpose? How quickly do you switch between apps, not out of need, but out of habit? Each swipe weakens attention. Each tap on autopilot dulls your inner discipline. Start small. Set limits, not to punish, but to practice mastery. Check with intention. Log off without needing closure. Leave comments unread. These are exercises, not restrictions. The news cycle adds another layer of emotional disruption. Every story is urgent. Every update is framed as a crisis. But most of what's reported does not require your immediate reaction. Stoicism reminds you that knowing everything is not the same as understanding, and reacting emotionally to distant problems without action only creates anxiety, not change. Limit how often you check the news. Set times. Use sources that inform, not manipulate. Ask, what can I do with this information? If the answer is nothing, treat it as background, not command. You are not less responsible because you unplug. You are more responsible when you choose engagement wisely. The pursuit of approval also runs deep online. Likes, shares, views, they become currency. But Epictetus warned against seeking praise from others who don't share your values. When you post just to be seen or scroll hoping to be validated, you give your power to people who don't even know you. Post if it's useful. Engage if it builds connection. Otherwise, don't play a game that costs your peace. Use the virtue of justice when consuming or creating content. Are you adding something true, helpful? Are you using your voice to contribute or to posture? Even a repost can be a reflection of character. Choose carefully. The digital world moves fast, but Stoicism asks you to pause. To ask, is this necessary? You can create systems that support your intent. Turn off notifications. Use grayscale mode. Set screen-free hours. Track your emotional state before and after time online. This is not about rigidity. It's about awareness. Because once you know what pulls your attention, you can stop giving it away blindly. Another powerful Stoic tool is journaling. Reflect on how digital use affects your inner life. Did something online make you anxious, jealous, reactive? Don't ignore it. Write it down. Examine it. What value was challenged? What story were you telling yourself? This turns reaction into reflection, and reflection into growth. In group chats, emails, forums, ask yourself, is this communication aligned with my principles? Or am I reacting to appear relevant, witty, or right? Justice and temperance apply to your tone as much as your message. Respond slowly. Read before reacting. Don't rush to comment unless it adds value. Digital conversations often lack the context of tone, facial expression, and presence, so misunderstandings are common. When this happens, apply courage and clarity. Seek to understand before defending. Correct with care. Step away when escalation serves no purpose. Not every comment deserves your energy. If you create content, this becomes even more critical. Are you driven by service or attention? Are you offering depth or chasing visibility? The world is full of noise. If you want to create something that reflects Stoic values, make it durable, make it rooted in truth, not trends. Your online behavior shapes who you become offline. If you spend hours reacting, comparing, and consuming, your ability to focus, reflect, and connect weakens. Stoicism brings you back to discipline, to purpose, to intentional action. Digital detox doesn't mean isolation, it means recalibration. Step back to ask, what role do these tools serve in my life? Do they bring clarity or chaos, growth or confusion? And if they aren't serving your principles, what are you willing to change? You don't need to delete everything, but you do need to own how you use it. The Stoic doesn't wait for calm to arrive. They build it, and that includes their digital habits. You can set a weekly reflection on digital behavior. How many hours online aligned with your goals? How many led to frustration? Which moments pulled you out of presence? Which strengthened it? Over time, these insights become direction, and direction becomes discipline. You can also practice stillness in between digital noise. Take a few minutes after scrolling to sit quietly. No input, just breath. Let your nervous system reset. This gap is powerful. It stops you from carrying one reaction into the next task. When others share things online that trigger you, pause. You don't need to respond. You don't need to fix it. You can observe, breathe, and choose silence. That is control. That is temperance. That is sovereignty. The digital world isn't going anywhere, but your relationship with it can evolve. You don't need to reject technology. You need to reshape how you move through it, slowly, consciously, with character. Once you've taken control of your digital inputs and built stronger filters against external triggers, you start to notice something deeper. The most persistent challenges don't come from outside. They come from within. A headline might spark anger. A message might provoke fear. A delay might stir frustration. But the real cause isn't the event. It's the automatic emotional reaction that follows. That reflex, that split-second surrender, the moment where your body takes over and your mind disappears. This is the final battleground, not the outside world, but the space between stimulus and response, that tiny gap where your true freedom lives. And this is where the Stoic pause becomes your greatest ally. The Stoic pause is not about bottling emotion or pretending not to care. It's about inserting choice where there used to be habit. It's the moment you stop being a puppet pulled by instinct and start acting as a conscious being. The event still happens, the emotion still rises, but instead of reacting immediately, you pause, briefly, fully, and ask a better question. Start with this. What exactly am I feeling? Most reactions escalate because they go unnamed. You feel something, tension, heat, agitation, but you don't recognize it clearly, so your nervous system labels it threat. And once labeled, it launches into fight, flee, or freeze. But when you identify the emotion as sadness, embarrassment, disappointment, or even just fatigue, the intensity drops, the body shifts, the pause stretches, and you can begin to think. That's the first layer of the pause, naming. The second is interpreting. What story am I telling myself about this event? Is that story true? Is it fair? Is it useful? Epictetus said that it's not things that disturb us, but our interpretations of them. That insight doesn't just apply to grand ideas. It applies to the person who cuts in line, the friend who forgets to text back, the co-worker's tone that feels dismissive. You're not reacting to the thing. you're reacting to what you think the thing means. So, inside the pause, test your story. Am I assuming intent where there is none? Am I personalizing something that has nothing to do with me? Am I layering my past onto this moment? This reframing isn't about denying feelings. It's about redirecting them. Anger becomes information instead of fuel. Fear becomes a signal, not a sentence. And you regain access to your higher mind, the part of you that reflects, considers, chooses. Next comes the question of proportion. Even if the event warrants emotion, does your reaction match the size of the problem? Is this worth what it's costing your mood, your energy, your focus? Most of the time, the answer is no. You're giving a small inconvenience the power to ruin your entire afternoon. The pause helps you see this, not intellectually, but viscerally. You feel the space open between you and the reaction. You don't push the feeling away. You just don't let it steer. This also changes how you communicate. In conflict, your first response is almost never your best. You feel the urge to speak sharply, defend quickly, accuse. But the pause says, wait, breathe, let the wave pass. What would this sound like if I said it 1 hour from now? That's a question that saves relationships. You can make this pause a habit by practicing with low-stakes triggers. A dropped object, a red light, a tech glitch. Instead of swearing or sighing, stop. Feel the reaction rise. Let it crest. Then speak or act with intention. Each time you do this, you reinforce the habit. You teach your nervous system that urgency is not truth. For high-stakes situations, you might need a longer pause. In conversation, buy time by asking a clarifying question. In email, save the draft instead of sending it. In decision-making, step outside for 5 minutes. These are tactical ways to widen the space, and in that space, character grows. The Stoic pause also allows you to bring in a deeper question. What virtue is being tested right now? Is this a call for patience, for humility, for firmness, for restraint? This shifts the focus from emotion to principle, and principle is steady even when feeling is not. You don't need to suppress your reaction, you need to examine it, and that requires enough space to see it before it becomes behavior. The pause turns reaction into observation, observation into understanding, and understanding into right action. This practice also builds resilience over time, because as you pause more often, your baseline shifts. You don't spike as high, you recover faster. You stop living on edge, waiting for the next thing to go wrong. And when it does go wrong, you're ready, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you've trained to stay clear inside the storm. Even joy can benefit from this pause. Before rushing to share it, stop and feel it fully. Before moving to the next thing, pause and savor. This turns moments into presence, and presence into memory. The Stoic pause also helps with regret. When you feel yourself pulled into shame or replaying an old mistake, pause. Ask, is this useful now? Is this leading to correction or just punishment? If it's the latter, let it pass. Not because it didn't matter, but because it already taught you what it came to teach. Over time, this small habit rewires your identity. You stop saying, I'm just emotional, or that's how I am. You begin saying, I choose how I respond. That is strength, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to steer it with clarity. You can reflect on your use of the pause each day. When did I react too quickly? What could I have done with 5 more seconds of space? Did I pause and choose, or did I obey the emotion? This reflection is not about blame. It's about growth. And the more honest you are, the faster that growth becomes real. You can also use this tool to coach others. When someone is overwhelmed, don't just tell them to calm down. Invite them to breathe, to name the feeling, to ask what story they're telling, to check the scale, to consider what value matters most right now. Teach them that the first reaction is only one of many possible responses, and often not the best one. Even in solitude, this pause is powerful. When your own thoughts become noisy, judging, worrying, obsessing, you can stop and step back. You can ask, is this thought helping or hurting? Is this fear real or recycled? The pause lets you become a thinker again, not a reactor. And when things go wrong, the pause becomes your reset, not in hours or days, but in seconds. You catch the rise, you breathe through it, you return to center. That's the hidden strength of this practice. It doesn't just change how you respond, it changes how quickly you recover. This is not about becoming slow or indecisive, it's about moving with precision. You still act, you still speak, but the action is rooted. The words are cleaner. You waste less energy on repair because you spent more effort on awareness. As you build this habit, people will notice. Your presence will change. Your energy will feel more grounded. Your words will carry more weight. Not because you're louder, but because they come from clarity, not chaos. Eventually, the pause becomes natural. You feel the emotion rise, and instead of fighting it or feeding it, you witness it, you hold it, you let it teach you, then you choose what to do next. That's freedom. The moment you learn to pause before reacting, you unlock control over yourself. That ability to pause and reframe allows you to walk through your day with greater strength and clarity. But even with this discipline, you'll still encounter setbacks, delays, resistance, and pain. They won't stop coming just because you're more aware. Life keeps unfolding the way it wants, not the way you wish. The next step isn't just managing that truth, it's learning to welcome it. This is where a deeper level of Stoic practice begins. It's not about tolerating hardship or enduring it with clenched teeth. It's about embracing it fully, even lovingly. Not just accepting what happens, but learning to say yes to it. This is the heart of amor fati, to love one's fate, not in theory, not when it's easy, but each morning, before the day even begins, through deliberate preparation and personal commitment. Amor fati isn't about blind optimism. It doesn't ask you to pretend that pain feels good or that failure is pleasant. It asks you to see challenge as necessary, as purposeful, as something that belongs. When you start your day with this mindset, you're not caught off guard by struggle. You expect it, you name it, you rehearse your response, not to protect yourself, but to meet it with openness. The ritual begins as soon as you wake up, before checking your phone, before moving into tasks. You sit or stand or even remain lying down for a few minutes. You take a breath and bring your mind to the day ahead. Then you choose 3 difficulties you are likely to face. Not catastrophes, just small, predictable obstacles. Maybe your commute will be slow. Maybe someone will interrupt you. Maybe a task you've been avoiding will demand your focus. These aren't surprises. They are part of life. You list them silently or write them down. Then for each one, you make a vow, not to merely get through it, but to meet it with appreciation. You say to yourself, I will not just accept this. I will love it. I will use it. I will meet it as a friend, not an enemy. This mindset rewires your emotional default. Instead of irritation, you begin with readiness. Instead of resistance, you bring intention. This doesn't mean you won't feel discomfort. It means the discomfort will no longer own you. You've already seen it coming. You've already made peace with it. And more than peace, you've claimed it as part of your path. By doing this every morning, you prepare yourself for the inevitable friction of real life. Someone will disappoint you. Something will break. A plan will fall apart. That's not failure. That's the design. That's the structure of reality. You don't become bitter because things went wrong. You become stronger because you knew they would. This ritual also transforms how you carry responsibility. Often, difficulty appears where you are needed most. When things go off course, you get to be the one who stays grounded, who brings clarity when others bring panic, who listens when others shout. That's not just emotional control, that's service, that's leadership. That's how you become useful in chaos. Amor fati also deepens your relationship with the people around you. When you expect conflict or misunderstanding, you stop resenting it. You stop expecting people to behave according to your preferences. You begin to see each encounter as a test, a teacher, a mirror. That difficult co-worker, part of the curriculum, that awkward silence, another moment to practice presence. The tension in your family, a space to exercise grace, not because it's enjoyable, but because it's essential. Each morning that you repeat this process, your lens sharpens. You stop asking for the day to be easy. You start asking for the strength to meet whatever comes with virtue. This is not detachment, it's deep engagement. Because you are no longer negotiating with life, you are agreeing to live it as it is. This mindset also prevents waste. When you expect ease and get struggle, you burn energy in disappointment. But when you expect struggle and get ease, you feel grateful. You don't waste the good. You don't resent the difficult. You adjust in real time. You can also apply amor fati to unexpected challenges. When something goes wrong that you didn't prepare for, return to your vow. Say it again. I choose to love this. Not because it's easy, but because it's here. This simple phrase is a pattern interrupt. It stops the spiral of complaint and reconnects you with your values. Nietzsche described amor fati as not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. This doesn't mean romanticizing suffering. It means aligning with reality so fully that you stop dividing the world into good and bad, fair and unfair. You stop clinging to the illusion that things should be different. You begin to shape yourself to meet what is real. Over time, this daily practice becomes more than a mental exercise. It becomes a worldview. You stop dreading Mondays. You stop avoiding responsibility. You stop treating discomfort as failure. Instead, you start moving toward the hard things, not recklessly, but willingly, because you've learned that they are part of your path to growth. This also expands your capacity to love others. When you practice amor fati, you love not just what life gives you, but who life places in front of you. Their faults, their complexity, their unpredictability. It all becomes part of the same training, and this softens your judgments. It allows you to stay open even when others close off. You can turn the ritual into a written habit. A simple morning note. 3 challenges, 3 vows. No need for long paragraphs. 1 sentence for each. Direct, sincere. This record becomes your trail of accountability. At the end of the week, review it. Did the challenges you named actually occur? Did others appear? Did you meet them with the mindset you committed to? Even when you fail to hold the mindset, that failure becomes part of the practice. You reflect, not to punish yourself, but to renew your vow. Each morning is a reset, a fresh agreement with life. This process also teaches you to expect emotion, but not to be ruled by it. You don't aim to be unfeeling, you aim to be unshaken. Emotion rises, but it doesn't drown you. You meet it, you move with it, you walk through it with direction. As your practice deepens, you may add another layer, not just what you expect, but what you fear. One small fear, named clearly, then reframed. If this happens today, I will meet it with courage. I will not fight it. I will use it. This doesn't summon fear. It prepares you for the moment when fear comes knocking. You can also apply amor fati to past events. Something painful that shaped you, something you once hated. Now you say, thank you, not because it felt good, but because it grew something in you that ease never could. This isn't passive. Amor fati is not surrender. It's the highest form of participation. You don't wait for perfect conditions. You act in full acceptance of imperfect ones. You create, you serve, you speak, you move forward without needing life to clear the path for you. This kind of mindset gives you consistency. It's easy to be motivated on a good day. But what do you do when things go sideways? When you're tired? When the people around you are difficult? That's when amor fati gives you an edge. You've already decided. You've already agreed. You don't retreat from effort. You rise with it. If you're someone who journals, add a closing statement each day. What difficulty did I meet with love today? It could be small, a delay, a conflict, a tough decision. If the answer is none, ask what blocked you. What value were you protecting? What belief got in the way? These questions make the mindset real. They keep it alive. When you live this way, people notice. They won't always understand it. They may even think you're detached. But what they're seeing is presence without panic, strength without resistance, joy without conditions. You become someone who doesn't just endure life. You walk with it, side by side, even when it's dark, even when it hurts. That's not just philosophy. That's courage. That's resilience. That's freedom. When you begin each morning by choosing to love what's difficult, by meeting the inevitable with acceptance and strength, something inside you starts to shift. You stop looking outward for stability. You stop needing everything to go your way. You realize that your strength doesn't depend on what happens, but on how you respond. And this brings you to a deeper question. Who are you really? Not what you do or what people say about you. Not your job title, not your past, not your reputation, but your actual identity, the way you define yourself when all of that is taken away. The answer most people give is built on roles. I'm a parent, I'm a student, I'm a leader, I'm a professional. But those can all change. They can be lost, stripped, challenged, and when they are, the identity built around them starts to collapse. Stoicism offers another option, one that doesn't depend on external success, social validation, or temporary labels. It asks you to build your sense of self on something that no one can take from you, your chosen virtues. Creating a virtue-based identity means defining yourself by what you stand for, what you cultivate, and how you live when no one is watching. It's about shifting your self-worth from what you have or achieve to the character you express in every moment. This doesn't make you perfect. It makes you anchored. Because when identity is rooted in virtue, setbacks don't break you. They remind you of your purpose. Start by asking yourself a simple question. If I could no longer rely on any of my titles, accomplishments, or possessions, what would I still be proud to stand for? The answer begins your identity work. Virtue doesn't need applause. It needs clarity and action. You don't need to prove it. You need to live it. The core Stoic virtues are your raw material: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. But you can shape them into your own voice. You might say, I am someone who seeks truth no matter how uncomfortable. That's wisdom. You might say, I am someone who speaks honestly even when it costs me. That's courage. You might say, I hold the line between discipline and joy. That's temperance. You might say, I serve fairness above comfort. That's justice. These phrases aren't aspirations. They are your blueprint. Write your identity statement slowly. Begin by reflecting on who you've been under pressure. What traits carried you through loss, through difficulty, through conflict? Those are not accidents. They're signals. Patterns of character that kept showing up when comfort disappeared. Use those memories to find language. You're not inventing a new self. You're uncovering the one that was there all along. Avoid making this a list of traits. A real identity statement isn't a resume. It's a compass. It should speak to who you are choosing to become, not because it looks good, but because it feels honest. It should reflect how you act when no one is clapping, when the day is hard, when you're alone with your choices. You can organize your statement by virtue. One sentence for each. For wisdom, I choose to ask more than assume. For courage, I act when fear tells me to hide. For temperance, I keep my peace in the middle of noise. For justice, I tell the truth, even when silence would protect me. These sentences become internal touchstones. When you're unsure, you return to them. When you're tested, you align with them. This kind of identity also protects you from ego. When you define yourself by how much you know, you become defensive when challenged. But if your identity is, I seek clarity, then admitting you were wrong doesn't hurt your self-worth. It confirms it. You stayed aligned with your virtue. That's progress. The same is true with failure. If you define yourself by achievement, every missed goal feels like collapse. But if your identity is built on effort, perseverance, integrity, then failure is just another moment to express who you are. You didn't lose. You revealed your commitment. This also applies to praise. When others admire you, but your identity is based on honesty, discipline, and fairness, you don't get carried away. You remember that approval is a byproduct, not a goal. It might come, it might go, but your values don't shift. Write your statement as something you can read aloud without cringing. If it sounds too lofty, simplify it. If it feels vague, sharpen it. If it feels performative, strip it back. This is not something you share to impress people. It's something you return to when you're lost, tired, or unsure. Your identity statement should fit on one page, and within that page, every line should remind you of your direction. Keep it visible, in your journal, on your wall, as a note in your phone. Read it each morning, especially on days when you wake up distracted or discouraged. Then act on it. Your identity is not what you write. It's what you repeat. Every time you make a choice that reflects your virtues, you reinforce that identity. Every time you step out of alignment, reflect and return. You don't need guilt. You need correction. Guilt paralyzes. Correction moves you. You can also use this identity to make decisions. When torn between two options, ask, which path aligns with who I've said I am? Not who I want to appear to be, but who I've chosen to be? That question simplifies complexity. It cuts through anxiety. It brings you back to the center. Your virtue-based identity also helps you say no to distractions, to temptations, to roles that look good but don't feel right. When you know who you are, you stop needing every opportunity. You don't chase relevance. You stay in rhythm with your principles. That kind of consistency builds trust, first with yourself, then with others. In conflict, this identity becomes your restraint. When emotions rise, you ask, how does someone who lives by this statement respond? That pause can stop escalation. It can bring clarity where confusion wants to take over. It's not about winning. It's about staying in alignment. You can update your statement as you grow, but don't rewrite it casually. Changes should come from reflection, not mood. Ask once a season, has my understanding of virtue deepened? Is this still my direction? What have I learned that should be integrated? When setbacks happen, return to your statement. Read it slowly. Ask, where did I depart from this? What would it have looked like to act from here? That reflection rebuilds integrity. It reminds you that identity is not static. It's built moment by moment. This also shapes how you interact with others. When someone behaves in a way that triggers you, your identity provides context. If your virtue is patience, then the interruption becomes practice. If your virtue is kindness, then the criticism becomes an opportunity. If your virtue is truth, then discomfort becomes clarity. Everything becomes training. In relationships, your identity creates steadiness. You stop needing others to complete you or validate you. You show up to give, not to perform. You love without possession. You listen without agenda. Because your worth is rooted in who you are, not what you get from others. In solitude, your identity becomes your companion. It guides your time, shapes your thoughts, aligns your habits. You stop drifting. You stop numbing. You return to the question, does this reflect who I said I would be? This is not perfectionism. It's commitment. You're not aiming to never slip. You're aiming to return faster, to rebuild stronger, to live in truth, not illusion. And when your life starts to reflect your virtues more than your roles, you become harder to shake. Job changes? You still have your compass. Public failure? You still have your standard. Success? It doesn't inflate you, because you know who you are without it. This is why virtue-based identity matters. It gives you a foundation that time cannot rot, that loss cannot steal, that noise cannot distort. Once you've built an identity anchored in virtue rather than roles or outcomes, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You know who you are even when no one is looking. But clarity does not mean you stop facing doubts, questions, or moments of uncertainty. Even the strongest identity needs renewal. Even the clearest path can feel uncertain when you're walking it alone. That's why the next step is not about thinking harder. It's about thinking together, with guidance, with wisdom, with voices that have stood the test of time. The Stoics left behind more than teachings. They left conversations, letters, meditations, and arguments filled with challenge, support, and deep honesty. You don't have to read them like textbooks. You can engage with them. You can step into dialogue with minds like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, not to worship their words, but to wrestle with them, to hear them speak back, to ask and be answered. This is the purpose of dialogic journaling, not a stream of your thoughts, a two-way exchange, a disciplined reflection where you bring your questions, your doubts, your frustration, and you allow a Stoic voice to meet them with honesty, clarity, and perspective. The process is simple, but not casual. Start with a clear moment, either something that happened that day or a thought that won't leave your mind. Write it down like a letter, as if you're sitting across the table from a Stoic sage. Address them directly. Seneca, today I felt like my efforts were invisible. I worked hard, stayed calm, and still felt overlooked. I know I'm not supposed to chase recognition, but how do I stay motivated without it? Once your question is out, pause. Let yourself answer, not from your usual voice, but from theirs. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to mimic every word. What matters is the tone, the logic, the values. How would Seneca respond? Maybe he reminds you that the work itself is the reward, that virtue is not validated by applause, but by its alignment with nature. Maybe he reminds you that even emperors are forgotten. So what makes you think praise will last? This exercise forces you to slow your thoughts, to argue from both sides, to find guidance not just from ideas, but from imagined conversation. It turns your journal into a personal dialogue, a place where philosophy becomes personal, not abstract. The reason this works is because it engages more than reason. It engages humility. When you're upset, you rarely challenge your story. You accept your emotion as fact. But when you step into another voice, especially one trained in reason and discipline, you're forced to reconsider, to look at the same problem from outside your own framing. And that's often where the solution is hiding. You don't have to limit yourself to problems. You can use dialogic journaling to explore decisions, to test ideas, to question habits. You might write, Epictetus, I've been avoiding a difficult conversation. I tell myself the timing isn't right, but maybe I'm just afraid. What would you say? And then write his imagined answer. He might not sympathize. He might ask, is your comfort more important than truth? If the conversation is necessary, delay only feeds fear. Go forward with clarity and compassion. The goal is not to always agree. Sometimes your imagined Stoic might challenge you in ways you resist. You might feel annoyed, even judged. That's part of the process. Let that tension surface. That's where the deeper learning lives. Over time, this becomes more than an exercise. It becomes a relationship. You return to your journal not just to record thoughts, but to be sharpened by them. You come for counsel, not comfort, for alignment, not escape. You can rotate voices. Ask Seneca about patience. Ask Marcus about power. Ask Epictetus about control. Each one had their lens, their context, their tone, and through them you shape your own. When you do this regularly, you build inner reference points. In moments of pressure, you'll start to hear the imagined voice before you even open the journal. You'll hear Seneca asking, is this action wise or simply easy? You'll hear Marcus reminding you, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you say and do. You'll hear Epictetus asking, is this within your power or beyond it? These voices begin as imagined, but they form a kind of inner council, a philosophical circle you carry into decisions, relationships, and challenge, not as a script, but as a lens, as a discipline. You can also use dialogic journaling to examine your identity statement. Write it out. Then ask Marcus, does this align with nature? Ask Seneca, does this serve both you and others? Ask Epictetus, are you owning what you control or trying to manipulate what you don't? This kind of interrogation doesn't tear you down. It refines you. It burns away what's weak and leaves what's strong. It prevents self-flattery from distorting your growth, and it brings you closer to truth. You can also write imagined letters from your future self, the version of you who has lived Stoic principles for 20 years. What would they say to you now? What would they remind you of? What would they caution against? This builds continuity. It reminds you that the goal is not just survival, it's transformation, through effort, through insight, through practice. If you struggle with belief in this process, remember, it's not about whether Seneca would literally say these words. It's about learning to think with a Stoic structure, to process your life through a filter of virtue, logic, and purpose. That skill doesn't require faith, it requires consistency. Sometimes the imagined voice will be silent. That's fine. Write anyway. Clarity often comes in the writing. The first answer may be vague, but by the third or fourth line, insight will start to take shape. Not because you forced it, but because the act of seeking drew it forward. Use this method especially when you feel stuck. When your emotions are loud and your mind is scattered, the discipline of the format will slow you down. It will help you ask better questions, and that's often the doorway to better answers. Over time, your journals become a library of conversations, not just records, but resources. You can return to old entries and see how your thinking evolved, how your questions changed, how your responses deepened. That's progress. Quiet, invisible, but real. You don't have to journal for hours. 10 minutes, 1 page, a single question, a sincere response. That's enough. What matters is the regularity, the rhythm, the honesty. If you ever feel like you're just writing to yourself, that's not a problem. That's the point, because the self you're becoming needs your attention, your questions, your discipline. This is where philosophy becomes friendship, where ancient thought becomes present guidance, not to give you certainty, but to strengthen your ability to keep walking, even without it. After spending time in conversation with Stoic minds, shaping your reflections into a discipline of inner dialogue, you start to notice a change in how you think. Your responses become more intentional, your choices feel clearer. But there's one more shift that must take place for your practice to deepen, for Stoicism to move from theory into the most emotional, intimate space of your life, your relationships. This step doesn't involve more control, more effort, or more structure. It requires presence, not just presence in action, but emotional presence, the kind that makes you stop in the middle of routine and feel the fragile, irreplaceable truth of the people around you, the kind that makes you see clearly what you often take for granted. The practice is called negative visualization, but its purpose is not negative at all. In Stoicism, negative visualization is a tool for preparation, humility, and focus. Applied to relationships, it becomes something even more powerful, a path to gratitude, not by looking for problems, but by facing the ultimate truth. Those you love will not be here forever, and neither will you. Most people avoid this thought. The idea of losing someone feels cruel, almost offensive. But avoiding the thought doesn't protect you from the reality. It only dulls your appreciation while they are still here. This practice is not about becoming cold. It's about feeling more, deeper, without distraction, without delay. You begin by choosing someone important to you, a partner, a parent, a child, a close friend, someone whose presence in your life is meaningful, someone whose absence would leave a permanent mark. Then you bring your attention to the truth that one day Their voice will no longer fill your ears. Their touch, their habits, their laughter will be memories, not part of your daily life. You don't do this to scare yourself. You do it to become alert, to break the trance of routine, to stop assuming there will be more time, because maybe there won't. And if that day comes, will you look back wishing you had seen more, said more, listened more, loved more without the armor? The power of this visualization comes from its honesty. You don't dramatize. You don't romanticize. You simply look clearly, with open eyes. And from that view, you return to the present with more gratitude than before. When you see someone as temporary, you listen differently. You look at their face with more attention. You let their flaws soften. You speak with more care, even in conflict, not because they're perfect, but because they are passing, just like you. This mindset does not remove frustration, but it changes its context. That argument you were preparing to start, not as urgent. That habit you were judging, maybe not worth the coldness. This doesn't mean you stop being honest. It means your honesty becomes kinder, your correction becomes softer, your presence becomes warmer. You can build this into your day as a small ritual. Each morning, before the day rushes in, choose one person and bring their face to mind. Say to yourself, this person is not guaranteed tomorrow. Let that truth guide how I treat them today, just once a day. One person, one intention. It will change your tone, your decisions, your attention. The practice also extends to moments you're already in. You're sitting at a table, your partner is talking, your child is laughing, your friend is telling a story you've already heard. Instead of tuning out, drop in. Think, what if this were the last time I hear this voice? What if this moment never repeats? That thought brings you fully alive. Over time, this awareness doesn't make you sad. It makes you generous. You give more eye contact, more patience, more warmth. Not because you're pretending anything is wrong, but because you've accepted that it all ends. And that acceptance increases the value of every shared second. Negative visualization also helps you repair relationships. When resentment builds, when communication breaks, when distance forms, ask yourself, if they were gone tomorrow, would I carry this silence with peace? Often, the answer is no, and that alone can guide your next step. It reminds you that pride is fragile, that being right is not always worth more than being close. You can also use this practice to appreciate people you've grown used to. The colleague you see every day, the sibling you text without much thought, the parent who checks in with small comments. Their constancy can make them invisible, but bring mortality into the frame, and they reappear. You see their effort, their love, even if imperfect. You remember how easily they could be gone. This practice also strengthens how you handle distance. When someone is far away or communication is limited, you can still connect to them through this exercise. You picture them. You bring them into your mind with the knowledge that they matter deeply to you. That awareness alone changes how you reach out. You might send a message you would have skipped, make a call you've delayed, say the words you've avoided. It's important not to treat this exercise as an obligation. It's not meant to induce guilt or force emotion. It's meant to reawaken clarity, to strip away the layers of assumption that numb your presence, to help you show up, not as someone waiting for loss, but as someone fully awake to love. Sometimes the person you visualize has already passed. In that case, the practice becomes one of memory and repair. You think about what they meant to you, what you miss, what you wish you'd said, and then you bring that insight into your relationships today. You let the lessons live forward. That's how memory becomes service, not sorrow. You can journal after each visualization. A short note. Who did I think of? What did I feel? What changed in me? These entries become anchors, a record of presence, a reminder of what matters when distractions tempt you away. This practice also reduces pettiness. It makes it harder to hold grudges, to gossip, to withdraw affection over small disagreements. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you deliberate. You speak because you care, not because you need to win. Even in moments of deep conflict, negative visualization offers perspective. You can still hold boundaries. You can still walk away if needed. But you do it with peace, with intention, with full awareness that this relationship, whatever its form, is not endless. Use this practice especially when you feel annoyance. In that moment, stop. Think. What if this is our last day together? What if this sentence is the last one I hear? That thought won't solve the conflict, but it will soften your tone. And sometimes, that's what saves the connection. The more you live with this awareness, the more generous your love becomes. You no longer say, I love you, out of habit. You say it because you mean it. Because you've seen what it means to not be able to say it anymore. This is not a mindset of doom. It's a mindset of gratitude, a clarity that removes delay, that makes today the right time to express what you normally withhold, to say thank you, to say I'm sorry, to say I see you. Over time, this way of thinking becomes your default, not in dramatic moments, but in the small, daily ones. You look at your partner before leaving the house and say a kinder goodbye. You respond to your child with more patience. You answer the phone with less tension. You move through the day with less armor. This practice, repeated regularly, makes your relationships richer, not because they're perfect, but because they're fully lived. That's all you can ask, to leave nothing unsaid, to meet people as they are, to love them before they're gone. And when they are gone, as someone always will be, this mindset will have prepared you. You will carry sadness, but not regret. You will mourn, but with peace, because you did the work in advance. You showed up while they were still here. You turned your love into action, not just intention. After practicing gratitude through the lens of impermanence, your priorities begin to reorganize. The small irritations lose their grip. The people you once overlooked feel more present. Your focus shifts naturally toward what matters most. But as you clear space in your relationships, there's another area where clarity is often clouded: your relationship with money. And it's here that many people, even the most thoughtful, quietly lose control. Financial pressure is one of the deepest sources of anxiety, not always because of actual need, but because of confusion between what is necessary and what is simply desired. Most people have never paused to define what enough truly means for them. They keep moving the target, chasing numbers, upgrades, and lifestyles that don't bring more peace, just more noise. Stoicism cuts through this by returning to a single core value: sufficiency. Living with sufficiency means defining clearly what you need to live well, not lavishly, not minimally, but wisely. It asks you to step back from the social comparison that drives overconsumption and root your financial planning in principles, not appearances. When your identity isn't built on possessions, your decisions become cleaner. When your values are clear, your budget becomes a tool for freedom instead of stress. The first step is building your sufficiency map. This isn't a spreadsheet of income and expenses. It's a map of values turned into financial terms. You start by asking, what does a good life require? Not what does it look like on the outside, but what does it feel like on the inside? Stability, yes, but also peace, margin, and time. Begin by listing your essentials: housing, food, healthcare, safety. These are your non-negotiables. Then add what supports your well-being: education, creative tools, time with family, access to nature. Not luxuries, but meaningful supports. Then stop. Resist the urge to add more. Sit with the list. Ask, what's truly needed here? This list becomes your foundation. From it, you define what a sufficient income looks like. Not a perfect number, but a working threshold. The amount of money that, if met, allows you to live in alignment with your values. If you already meet it, your financial goal becomes protection and sustainability, not endless accumulation. If you don't, your focus becomes strategy and priority, not guilt or envy. The second layer of your sufficiency map involves lifestyle boundaries. These are the decisions that protect your peace. Where will you live? What will you own? What will you say no to, even if you can afford it? These aren't restrictions. They're values in action. If your sufficiency includes solitude, then maybe you choose a smaller home in a quieter place over a big house in a noisy neighborhood. If it includes time, then maybe you choose a job with less pay but more freedom. These choices become easier when the goal is virtue, not status. Consumerism thrives on insecurity. It tells you that what you have is never enough, that happiness is always one purchase away. But Stoicism flips that completely. It tells you that once your needs are met, more things don't add peace, they often remove it. They take your time, your energy, your focus. The more you own, the more you must manage. The more you chase, the more restless you become. By applying Stoic clarity to spending, you learn to ask better questions before making financial choices. Not, can I afford this? But, does this align with my purpose? Not, will this impress? But, will this serve? These questions shrink impulse. They also shrink regret. A sufficiency-based approach also helps you build a safety net without obsession. You save not out of fear, but out of foresight. You plan for the future, not to control it, but to care for it. You prepare not to avoid hardship, but to meet it calmly. That's what separates Stoic financial planning from simple frugality. It's not about hoarding. It's about preparing wisely and letting go of the rest. This mindset changes how you think about income. You stop measuring success by how much you earn and start measuring it by how aligned your work is with your values. If a higher salary comes with less integrity, it's not success, it's a cost. If a modest income gives you time to live with intention, that's wealth by Stoic standards. You can revisit your sufficiency map regularly. Seasons change, needs shift, but the principles stay. At each review, ask, what has changed in my values? What has remained? Where have I overreached? Where have I underspent on what truly matters? Use the map to make bigger life decisions as well. Before a major purchase or career move, hold it up to the standard. Does this support sufficiency or disturb it? That one filter can prevent years of financial tension and emotional drift. This approach also reframes generosity. When you're no longer focused on acquiring more than enough, you free up resources, time, money, energy, to give. Not because you feel pressured to, but because you're not being drained by constant accumulation. You begin to see giving not as loss, but as clarity. You give because you've already defined what you need, and the rest becomes potential service. There's also strength in being transparent about this practice. When others ask why you've chosen a simpler path, speak plainly, not defensively, just honestly. This supports my peace. This reflects what matters most to me. Your clarity might make others uncomfortable, or it might inspire them to define sufficiency for themselves. If you have children, this mindset becomes a legacy. Teaching them early that wealth is not a number, but a capacity to live in line with values. That joy doesn't come from consumption, but from contribution. That a life full of stuff is not always full of meaning. Even with ambition, sufficiency still applies. You can aim high without losing your center. You can grow your income, your impact, your skills, all within the framework of your values. Ambition, when rooted in virtue, becomes service. When rooted in ego, it becomes hunger. The sufficiency map also becomes your reference during moments of envy. When you see someone living larger, pause. Ask, would that life support or sabotage what I've said I value? Most of the time, the answer is clear. And when it is, the envy fades. You can make this entire process visual. Draw out your categories. Write down your core needs. List the boundaries. Define the goals. Keep it simple. 1 page. Look at it weekly. Use it when facing temptation. Use it when making decisions. Use it when you feel lost financially. This is not about deprivation, it's about refinement, removing what doesn't serve to make room for what does. You'll find that many of your most meaningful experiences cost little. Conversations, time in nature, creative expression, thoughtful work, presence. These are rarely sold, but always valuable. If you track your spending, label each category not just by item, but by virtue. Was this courage? Was this wisdom? Was this temperance? Was this justice? You'll start to see patterns, where you spend out of fear, where you buy to impress, where you give with joy. That insight becomes accountability. Stoic financial planning also involves contentment. Practicing it means reminding yourself daily, I already have what I once prayed for. This doesn't mean you stop improving. It means you stop ignoring what you've already achieved. And when you do want more, you question the want. Where is it coming from? Is it desire for freedom or for display? Is it based on lack or illusion? The deeper the question, the clearer the decision. This mindset is especially powerful in times of loss, when income drops, when plans fall apart, when goals aren't reached. You remember that your worth is not tied to your net worth, that peace does not require perfection, that sufficiency, when well defined, is rarely lost. Your financial path becomes part of your moral path, a reflection of your discipline, your clarity, your purpose. You're not trying to win a race. You're trying to live a life, one that reflects your principles, that doesn't just survive, but flourishes without excess. Once your financial life is grounded in clarity and restraint, something deeper begins to surface. You no longer spend to impress. You no longer chase without direction. You begin making decisions that serve your values, not your ego. But this shift leads to a larger question. If success is not defined by how much you earn or own, then what is it? What is the real measure of a life well lived? For most of your life, you've been taught that success looks a certain way: a title, a salary, a set of accomplishments that others can applaud. But those things, while not wrong in themselves, often become distractions. They become goals detached from meaning. You reach them only to feel emptier than before, and that's because achievement without alignment never satisfies for long. Stoicism offers another measure, one that doesn't rely on public approval or comparison, one that stays with you in private, even when no one notices. That measure is called eudaimonia, a Greek word that means human flourishing, not momentary happiness, but enduring fulfillment, not comfort, but inner strength, not status, but virtue expressed consistently in action. Redefining success through eudaimonia means shifting your focus from what you do to who you become, from what you accumulate to how you live. It means setting goals that reflect character, not just milestones. It means asking whether your progress is making you more patient, more just, more courageous, more wise, not just more recognized or more rewarded. To begin this shift, start by reflecting on your current definition of success. Where did it come from? Whose voice shaped it? What does it require from you, and what does it cost? Often, the answers reveal that what you've been chasing is a version of success inherited from others, not one you designed from within. Next, ask yourself what kind of person you would respect if you met them without knowing their background. No job title, no awards, no followers, just presence, behavior, and clarity. What traits would make you listen to them, trust them, learn from them? That picture is your blueprint for inner excellence. That's the kind of success eudaimonia leads to. Now apply it to your own goals. Instead of aiming to be rich, aim to be generous and resourceful. Instead of aiming to be powerful, aim to be responsible and calm under pressure. Instead of aiming to be famous, aim to be useful and principled. Each of these is harder to measure, but also harder to fake. They build from the inside out. They last. This mindset also protects you from burnout. When your goals are based on image, the effort never ends. There's always someone doing more, earning more, achieving faster. But when your goal is alignment with virtue, the path becomes steady. You wake up asking not, "How far have I gone?" but, "How fully did I show up today?" That shift brings peace. You can redesign your success metrics to match this standard. Instead of tracking followers, track how many meaningful conversations you had this week. Instead of checking how many deals you closed, ask how many people you helped with integrity. These are still measurable, but they point inward, not outward. The same applies to how you spend time. Are your hours filled with tasks that grow your character, or just tasks that protect your reputation? When you organize your day around flourishing, you stop filling it with filler. You choose depth over speed, purpose over pressure. This mindset also changes how you view failure. When success is based on outcomes, failure feels like identity collapse. But when success is based on virtue, failure becomes instruction. If you acted with courage and still lost, you haven't failed. You've grown. If you told the truth and were rejected, you're still aligned. That's strength, not weakness. The same is true in relationships. When success means being loved or admired, you become performative. You adjust who you are to keep others close. But when success means being virtuous, you bring your full self to the table. You show up with clarity, and that attracts people who value substance. You can write a new success statement to anchor this mindset, one that doesn't mention achievements, but principles. It might say, "Success means waking up and living in alignment with wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. It means offering the best of myself regardless of outcome. It means being someone I respect, even when no one is watching. Keep it visible. Let it guide your decisions. When you feel discouraged, use this definition to ask better questions. Instead of, "Why am I behind?" ask, "Am I aligned?" Instead of, "Why don't they see my value?" ask, "Am I living by my own?" This reframing shifts your energy from desperation to direction. Eudaimonia also brings patience. When success isn't rushed, you stop needing shortcuts. You're no longer tempted to sacrifice your values for quick wins. You build slowly, honestly, steadily. And that's the kind of growth that actually endures. This mindset doesn't make you passive. It doesn't ask you to give up ambition. It asks you to root your ambition in character. To ask not just what do I want, but who am I becoming in pursuit of it? That one question changes everything. Use your weekly reflection to track progress in eudaimonia. Ask, did I grow in patience, in understanding, in discipline? Did I speak truthfully even when it was hard? Did I show up fully in the moments that tested me? These are your new check marks, and they carry real weight. You can also use this lens when setting future goals. Before writing them down, ask, does this goal support my inner flourishing? Or is it feeding a need to be seen, admired, or envied? There's nothing wrong with aiming high. But without reflection, goals can become cages. They start shaping your self-worth instead of expressing it. This approach also affects how you celebrate. When success is internal, the celebration becomes quieter, but more sincere. You don't need a crowd. A small moment of self-respect is enough. A moment where you know, I lived today in truth. Over time, this builds a quiet confidence, not arrogance, just peace. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing proof. You carry yourself differently. And that difference is felt, even if it's never said out loud. This mindset also helps you navigate transition. When careers end, when relationships shift, when plans fall through. If your identity was built on external markers, you feel lost. But if it's built on eudaimonia, you simply return to your core and rebuild with grace. Even in loss, this mindset holds. When someone you love is gone, when a dream is no longer possible, eudaimonia reminds you life is still meaningful when it's lived with virtue. That meaning doesn't erase pain, but it carries you through it. If others question your choices, stay grounded. Not everyone will understand a path that doesn't chase the usual rewards, but those who matter will feel the difference in how you live. And sometimes, your presence will invite them to reflect on their own definition of success. You can also journal your evolving definition over time. Write it once a month. See how it changes. What values rise, what illusions fall. That evolution becomes a record, not of what you achieved, but of who you became. Eudaimonia is not a destination. It's a way of moving, a lens for seeing, a structure for becoming. It asks more from you than achievement ever did, but it also gives more back. Peace, clarity, strength. And when you build success on that foundation, you build something that cannot be taken away. Once success is no longer about applause, but about alignment. Once your identity reflects virtue instead of image, you begin to feel more stable within yourself. There is less pressure to perform, less fear of judgment, less dependence on outcomes. This stability isn't just a personal benefit, it's a source of strength for others as well. Because when the people around you feel unsteady, anxious, or reactive, the person who remains calm becomes an anchor, The person who holds their center during conflict becomes a guide. This is where leadership begins, not with titles, but with character. Leadership, through the lens of Stoicism, is not about control or authority. It is about influence shaped by virtue. It is the discipline of emotional sovereignty, the ability to stay composed in the middle of chaos, to act from principle instead of impulse, and to be clear when others are clouded. It's not about commanding others, it's about mastering yourself so that your presence leads without force. To become this kind of leader, you begin with your own nervous system. The first skill is stillness under pressure. You will be tested by disagreement, by urgency, by criticism. These are not problems. They are invitations to practice composure. When you're triggered, pause, breathe. Observe your emotions before acting. The Stoic leader doesn't suppress feeling. They channel it. Anger becomes clarity. Fear becomes precision. Ego becomes discipline. In meetings, your tone becomes a model. Your facial expressions become signals. Your reactions teach more than your words. When others escalate, you de-escalate. When people rush to judgment, you slow the pace. This isn't weakness, it's strategy. A leader who doesn't overreact becomes someone others trust to hold the line. You also train your decision-making. Every choice must answer to one core question. Is this just? Not, is it popular? Not, is it easy? Not, will it make everyone happy? But is it rooted in fairness, honesty, and the long-term good? Justice is the highest Stoic virtue because it looks beyond personal benefit. It sees the whole. And leadership without justice is not leadership, it's manipulation. This requires the courage to disappoint. You will not please everyone. You will not always be understood. But if you've acted with integrity, if you've listened carefully, if your intent was clear, then your peace is intact, even if others disagree. That's the test of sovereignty. Your calm doesn't collapse under pressure to conform. A Stoic leader also practices consistency. They don't shift principles to match the mood. They don't overpromise. They don't make threats they won't follow through on. Their words carry weight because their actions match. This builds quiet authority, the kind that earns respect without needing to demand it. In moments of conflict, you lead with clarity. You don't rush to win. You seek to understand. You ask questions, you listen fully. You reflect before responding. And when you do respond, you speak from structure. You don't humiliate, you don't retaliate. You restore direction. This makes your leadership sustainable. Because people may fear power, but they follow presence. When you're able to stay grounded, others begin to mirror you. Your calm regulates the environment. Your steadiness creates safety. Your silence carries weight. Modeling this requires discipline in private. The Stoic leader journals. They reflect. They learn from missteps without shame. They audit their intentions regularly. They ask, where did I act from fear? Where did I let emotion override principle? Where was I too passive or too controlling? When mistakes are made, the Stoic leader owns them, not to appear humble, but to remain free. Hiding failure traps you. Owning it liberates you. It shows those you lead that honesty is safe, that growth is allowed, that accountability is not punishment, it's strength. You also lead by example in emotional intelligence. When someone brings emotion into the room, anger, sadness, frustration, you don't match it with reaction. You make space for it. You acknowledge it without being ruled by it. Your ability to be present without absorbing chaos becomes a kind of silent teaching. This doesn't mean you lack emotion. It means you've trained your relationship with it. You've learned to sit with discomfort without trying to fix it too quickly. You've learned to give feedback without superiority, to receive feedback without collapse. The Stoic leader also values reason above mood. They don't let excitement override caution. They don't let disappointment cloud direction. They stay close to facts, close to purpose. They know that passion without clarity creates noise, not progress. You can bring these principles into daily leadership habits. Start meetings with intention, not small talk. Begin projects with questions about purpose, not performance. When reviewing work, ask first what was learned, not just what was delivered. Train your attention. Don't multitask when people speak to you. Look at them. Listen fully. Reflect back what you heard. These small disciplines send a message. I see you. I respect your voice. That message builds trust. In delegation, give clarity, not just tasks. Explain why something matters. Connect action to mission. Give people a sense of meaning, not just responsibility. And check in not just on progress, but on well-being. Ask how people are doing, not only what they're doing. During conflict, bring the room back to shared values. Remind the group of what matters most. Bring attention to the bigger purpose, not just the disagreement. You don't have to solve every problem, but your clarity can break through confusion. Also, be aware of your limits. The Stoic leader knows they are not the solution to every issue. They create systems, they build teams, they trust others. They avoid micromanagement because it signals fear. Delegation, when rooted in trust, communicates respect. This style of leadership also transforms power. It's no longer something to protect or expand. It becomes something to use wisely. You don't need to prove you're in charge. You focus on making space for others to grow. You mentor, you coach, you clear barriers. You don't lead from above, you lead alongside. You also model boundaries. You don't overwork to appear committed. You rest to remain clear. You don't pretend to have all the answers. You show that questioning is part of leadership. That vulnerability, when paired with strength, builds real credibility. Each day, you reflect not just on outcomes, but on presence. Did I lead with clarity? Did I prioritize fairness? Did I remain centered, even in pressure? Did I listen more than I spoke? These reflections refine your posture. They sharpen your impact. When others around you spiral, you don't correct with force. You offer steadiness. When pressure builds, you hold the line. When people struggle, you respond with quiet courage. Not to fix them, but to remain present while they find their ground again. Over time, this style becomes rare. Because in a world that rewards noise, the calm person stands out. In a culture that chases urgency, the thoughtful person becomes a resource. Not everyone will understand your stillness, but those who need it will be drawn to it. You become the kind of leader whose presence changes the room, not because you dominate it, but because your presence brings order, integrity, clarity. That is real power. You don't control people, you influence through virtue. You don't silence disagreement, you guide it toward understanding. You don't impose your will, you invite alignment around what matters. This kind of leadership is not built in crisis, it's built in repetition, in how you show up every day, in how you greet pressure, in how you speak, listen, and carry yourself when no one is watching. After learning how to lead with steadiness, how to carry calm through pressure, how to embody justice in decision-making, you begin to realize that leadership and life itself is built on one thing above all: choice. Every action you take, every word you say, every commitment you accept begins with a decision. And the quality of your choices determines the quality of your direction. But most people make decisions on autopilot, driven by urgency, emotion, or habit. Stoicism teaches another path, clear, deliberate, and aligned with purpose. To follow that path, you need a filter, a way to know what belongs in your life and what does not, what demands your energy and what must be declined, what you should say yes to, and what you must let pass. Epictetus offered one of the most powerful tools for this, a mental doorway. Before any decision, ask yourself 3 questions. Is this necessary? Is this my role? Is this virtuous? This is Epictetus's door. The door is not a physical place. It's a practice, a moment of pause before you step into something new, an opportunity, a conversation, a reaction. Instead of acting from pressure or desire, you stop, you ask, you evaluate, and you only move forward if the answers bring alignment. Start with the first question: is this necessary? Not, is this interesting? Or, could this be useful one day? But, is this essential right now? Most obligations in modern life are distractions disguised as duties. Meetings, emails, projects, requests, they pile up. Without clarity, they devour your attention. But when you train yourself to ask what's truly needed, you start protecting your time as a sacred resource. Necessity isn't about survival, it's about purpose. Does this contribute to my mission? Does it move my work forward? Does it serve the people I'm responsible for? If not, it might be optional noise. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it may not belong in your day. The second question: is this my role? This question removes the weight of false responsibility. Many people carry burdens that were never theirs to hold. They insert themselves into drama. They try to fix what others must face. They say yes out of guilt, not duty. This question asks you to stay in your lane, not to avoid service, but to honor it properly. When you ask, is this my role? You're not evading, you're clarifying. If someone is venting, is your role to solve their problem or to listen? If a decision must be made, is it your place to lead or to support? Every time you overstep your role, you confuse the structure. You disempower others. You stretch yourself too thin. Staying within your role doesn't shrink you. It strengthens you. Because when you honor your space, you perform with more clarity. You know where your responsibility starts and where it ends. That's how focus survives. The final and most important question: is this virtuous? Even if something is necessary, even if it's your role, it must still be done with integrity. Virtue turns task into character. If a decision asks you to act in a way that contradicts your values, even subtly, it's a sign to stop. A strategy that sacrifices justice is no longer a strategy. It's a compromise. When this question is applied consistently, it protects you from regret. You no longer trade long-term peace for short-term reward. You no longer act in ways you'll have to explain away later. You stay aligned, even when it costs something. Each of these questions works alone, but together they form a powerful filter. If the answer to all 3 is yes, necessary, your role, and virtuous, then you proceed. If any one is no, then the answer becomes clear. You walk away. No guilt, no fear, just clarity. Use this method for both big and small decisions. Should I take on this project? Should I respond to this message? Should I speak up in this meeting? Ask the 3 questions. Write them down if needed. Train them into muscle memory. This practice doesn't slow you down. It clears the clutter that slows you more. Instead of managing crisis after crisis, you act with foresight. Instead of reacting to everything, you respond to what matters. It also helps in emotional situations. You get provoked. You feel attacked. You want to reply. Stop. Ask, is this response necessary? Is it my role to correct this? Is it virtuous to speak now, or would silence be wiser? That pause changes everything. It turns instinct into intention. This also guides delegation. If something is necessary but not your role, hand it off. Don't hoard tasks. Don't confuse control with excellence. Trust others to carry what's theirs. That trust builds healthy systems. That release builds healthier leaders. Even your schedule can pass through this door. Look at your calendar. What's necessary? What reflects your role? What supports virtue? Cancel or reduce what doesn't meet the standard. You don't need to be everywhere. You need to be where you're called to be, fully. This practice becomes even more important during growth. As your influence expands, so will the requests. Opportunities will flood in. Praise will feel addictive, but most of what is offered won't be aligned. The door helps you stay grounded. You don't chase everything, you choose wisely. It also reduces decision fatigue. When you have criteria, you don't need to overthink every choice. You run the filter. You trust the result. Mental clarity improves. Emotional noise fades. You reclaim attention for what matters. Use the door to audit past decisions too. Look back on moments you regret. Which question did you skip? Did you act on impulse, step outside your role, or abandon virtue for speed? This isn't about shame. It's about pattern recognition. Learn, adjust, move forward stronger. You can apply this to habits. Should I watch this show? Should I scroll through this app? Necessary? My role? Virtuous? Even entertainment can pass through this filter. You're not being rigid. You're being honest about what strengthens or weakens your attention. You can share this framework with your team, your family, your partner. Teach others to ask the same questions. Build a culture of decision-making rooted in purpose. Meetings become clearer. Relationships become cleaner. Boundaries become easier to maintain. This isn't perfection. You will still slip. You will still act from emotion sometimes. That's human. But each time you return to the door, your choices improve. Your discipline grows. Your peace becomes less negotiable. Eventually, the door becomes invisible, but still there. A pause between stimulus and action, a whisper that says, check before you step. And every time you listen, you get stronger. You've just walked through one of the most transformative paths a person can take, not toward a better image, but toward a better self. Over these 3 hours, you didn't just learn about Stoicism, you practiced it. You trained your focus. You confronted ego. You stepped into discomfort on purpose. You reframed failure. You reshaped your identity. You learned to lead not with control, but with calm. And you made decisions not from impulse, but from clarity, from premeditatio malorum to amor fati, from virtue tracking to financial sufficiency, from journaling with the Stoics to facing mortality with open eyes. You've now built the mental armor that protects your peace without closing your heart. This is what taking control of your life actually looks like. Not perfection, not constant positivity, but discipline, resilience, and full alignment with what matters most. Now it's your turn to step into the world and live it. Live like someone who has trained their mind. Lead like someone who owns their choices. Love like someone who knows time is short. If this journey moved something in you, drop a comment below and write, "I choose the Stoic path." That's your commitment to yourself and a signal to others walking this road beside you. And if you want more guides like this, practical, grounded and real, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the tools to build a life of strength, clarity and purpose. We'll see you in the next video. Stay focused, stay present, and above all, stay sovereign.